The register tape was spitting out receipts that looked like bad fortunes, and I, Nina Keats, 26 years old and feeling every minute of it, was trying to make the numbers match. It was late, or early, depending on your poison. The Blue Mercury diner didn't care about the clock. It just sat there, humming its greasy hum, smelling of coffee burnt to sludge and the sharp, metallic tang of rain hitting the neon sign out front. The sign buzzed, a flickering blue angel drowning in the east fall night. My shift was technically over. Mags, our cook, who'd been frying eggs in this very kitchen since before I was born, was already mopping the checkerboard floor with angry, rhythmic strokes, the scent of pine cleaner fighting a losing battle against decades of fried onions. I was just totaling the tips, a pathetic pile of singles and quarters, when the sound hit. It wasn't a knock. It was a thud. A heavy, desperate fist against the steel delivery door in the back alley. Mags and I froze. Nobody comes to the delivery door at this hour unless it's trouble or a supplier who's 3 days late. This didn't feel like a lost beer delivery. Thud, thud! It was urgent. I looked at Mags. He just tilted his head, his face impassive under the fluorescent lights, and gripped the mop handle. I wiped my hands on my apron, the blue fabric stained with ketchup and regret, and moved toward the back. Maybe it's just drunk Charlie from the bar, I muttered, knowing damn well it wasn't. I hit the switch for the alley light. It flickered, buzzed, and died, of course. I peered through the reinforced peephole, the glass warped and grimy. All I could see was rain, a solid sheet of it, and a shape, a big one. Against every screaming instinct in my body, I undid the deadbolt. The lock was stiff from the damp. I pulled the heavy door open maybe 3 inches. He filled the frame. He was soaked, water streaming from hair as black as the alley itself. He wore a suit, or what was left of it, a fine, dark material that was plastered to his shoulders, ruined. But it wasn't the rain that held my gaze. It was the other stain. A dark, ugly patch spreading from his side, drying to a rusty brown even in the downpour. His eyes found mine. They were gray, not blue, not charcoal, but the color of steel, cold and hard and utterly flat. He didn't ask for help. He didn't plead. He just looked straight through me, and his voice was a low gravel, barely louder than the storm. "I need 5 minutes." That's all he said, 5 minutes. My throat closed up. My mind was blank. Who, what? And then, as if the night itself was answering my unasked questions, I heard it. A sound from the front street, not the normal late-night traffic. This was the sharp squeal of performance tires hitting wet asphalt too fast, a heavy engine roaring where it shouldn't. Headlights cut across the diner's front windows, sweeping shadows across the booths. My decision was made. It wasn't a choice, it was a reflex. I yanked the door open, and he didn't wait for an invitation. He stumbled in, bringing the smell of rain and iron with him. He was tall, much taller than I realized, and he leaned heavily against the stainless steel prep table, his breath hissing. The dark patch on his suit was stark under the kitchen lights. "The storeroom," I snapped, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. I grabbed his arm. It was solid muscle under the wet fabric, and pulled him past the humming ice machine, past the sacks of potatoes. He left a small, smeared trail of muddy water and something darker. I ripped a heavy vinyl tarp off a stack of delivery boxes and threw it over the smear on the floor. "In here." I pointed to the walk-in freezer. "The fan's broken. It's just a cold box, but stay off the shelves." I shoved the heavy, old-fashioned latchkey into his hand. "Don't come out. Don't make a sound." He just looked at me. That flat, gray gaze. He nodded once, a sharp, precise movement, and disappeared into the cold darkness of the walk-in. I pulled the heavy door shut, the thunk of the seal sounding final. I took half a second to breathe, leaning against the cold metal, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. What did I just do? The bell on the diner's front door jangled. It was a cheerful sound that made my blood run cold. I pushed through the swinging kitchen doors, forcing my face into a mask of weary indifference. 3 men stood just inside the entrance, shaking water from expensive-looking long coats. They were not cops. Cops looked tired. These men looked bored, which was infinitely more terrifying. They scanned the empty diner, the overturned chairs, the single flickering light over the jukebox with disdain. The one in the middle, the leader, had a smile that didn't touch his eyes. He was older, with silvering hair at his temples and a nose that had been broken more than once. "Evening, sweetheart," he said, his voice like silk sliding over broken glass. "A little late for coffee, isn't it?" He and his partners fanned out, their movements smooth and practiced. One stayed by the door, the other walked the length of the counter, tapping a finger on the glass pie display. "We're closing up," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Filter's been cleaned. I can get you a soda to go." The leader chuckled. He stepped closer, and I had to fight the urge to step back. He smelled of damp wool and expensive cologne. He flipped open a leather wallet, flashing a badge. It was shiny and gold. City County Inspection Unit, it read. CCEU. I'd never heard of it. It looked brand new, like it had been minted yesterday. "We're inspectors, darling, just checking on sanitation compliance. You know, rats, leaks, fugitives." His smile widened. "Mind if we look around, check the back?" My heart was in my throat. "Be my guest," I managed. "But my cook, Mags, is mopping. He gets grumpy." The leader's eyes slid past me, toward the kitchen doors. "I'm sure he does. We'll start with your security footage. Protocol, you understand, we need to see the last hour of activity." This was it. "Oh, gosh," I said, widening my eyes, playing the part of the flustered minimum wage girl. "The system's been on the fritz all week. The owner keeps saying he'll get it fixed." I needed to buy time. I needed Mags to hear. I turned quickly, perhaps too quickly, toward the coffee station. My elbow accidentally connected with a tray of heavy glass water tumblers stacked by the register. The crash was explosive. Glass sprayed across the counter and shattered on the floor. "Oh, my God," I yelped, genuinely startled by the noise. "I'm so sorry, I'm so clumsy. Damn it," I dropped to my knees, pretending to gather the larger shards, my hands shaking. I glanced toward the kitchen, through the small circular window in the swinging door. I saw Mags. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the small, black DVR box on a shelf near the breaker panel. As I watched, his hand, covered in flour, reached up and flicked the main power switch. The small green light on the box died. "Problem, sweetheart?" The leader was standing over me. I'm just making a mess," I stammered, grabbing a fistful of napkins. "It'll come out of my paycheck. God, I'm so stupid." "Leave it," he snapped, his patience gone. He strode to the kitchen door and pushed it open. "Hey, Gramps, the DVR." Mags turned slowly, mop in hand. "What DVR thing's been busted for a month? Boss is too cheap to fix it." The leader stared at Mags, then at the dead box on the shelf. His partner, the one from the counter, had already walked to the back, near the delivery entrance. "Boss," the partner called out, "got a fresh smear here, mud, and something else." My stomach turned to ice. The tarp. I hadn't covered it all. The leader walked back, kneeling by the spot. He touched the edge of the smear with a gloved finger. He looked up at me, his eyes sharp. "Looks like someone was in a hurry and clumsy." The lie came faster than I expected. "Oh, that," I said, forcing a laugh. "That was just Tony, from the liquor delivery. He dropped a case of red wine earlier, slipped in the puddle he made, drunk off his ass by 7 p.m. Can you believe it? I mopped, but I guess I missed a spot." The leader stared at me. He was calculating. Did he believe me? Did it matter? He knew I was lying. I knew he knew. It was a silent, ugly negotiation. He finally stood up, wiping his finger on a napkin. He smiled that dead smile again. Red wine. Right. He looked around the kitchen one more time, his gaze lingering on the heavy, locked door of the walk-in freezer. My heart stopped. He took a step toward it. "That's the freezer," I said, my voice too high. "It's broken, the fan, everything in there is spoiled, smells awful. We're waiting on a repairman." He paused, his hand on the latch. He looked at me, then at Mags, then back to the door. For a second, I was sure he was going to open it, that he'd see the man with the steel gray eyes and the hole in his side, and that would be the end of me, Mags, and the blue mercury. Then he shrugged. Right, spoiled. He turned and walked out of the kitchen. "You have a lovely night, sweetheart," and he called back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Get that DVR fixed." His men followed him out. The front door jangled shut. I watched through the front window as they climbed into a black sedan that looked more like a government vehicle than any inspector's car I'd ever seen. The car sat for a moment, its wipers pushing the rain away, and then it pulled silently into the street and disappeared. I let out the breath I'd been holding. It came out as a ragged sob. "Nina," Mag said, his voice quiet, "you locked the front. Now." I did as I was told, fumbling with the deadbolt. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I walked back to the kitchen. The silence in the diner was heavy, broken only by the drip of the leaky faucet and the hum of the neon sign. I stood in front of the walk-in freezer. I didn't want to open it. Part of me hoped the man had vanished, that I'd imagined the whole thing. I lifted the heavy latch. The door swung open with a hiss of cold air. He was there. He hadn't moved from where he stood just inside the door, a phantom among the hanging sides of beef. His breath plumed in the cold. He looked at me, and that was all. He stepped out, moving slowly, but his steps were steady. He was clearly in pain, his hand pressed tight to the dark stain on his side, but he wasn't weak, far from it. He walked past me, past Mags, and into the empty diner. He went to the counter, right where I'd been counting my tips, and placed something heavy on the laminate surface. It landed with a solid, definitive thud. It was a phone, but not like any phone I'd ever seen. It was thick, black, and encased in heavy-duty rubber. It had no logo, no camera lens. It looked like a piece of military hardware. He looked at me, his gray eyes seeming to catalog everything: the cheap tile, the cracked vinyl on the booths, the desperation hanging in the air. "You just picked a side," he said. His voice was still that low, rough gravel. I bristled. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a bitter, cold fear in its wake. "I didn't pick anything," I snapped back, surprised at my own nerve. "I picked, I don't let violent bullies tear up my workplace. That's all." For the first time, something in his expression shifted. The ice in his eyes didn't melt, but it cracked. A flicker of something amusement, maybe even respect, passed through them. It was almost a smile, but it never reached his lips. "They'll be back," he said. "The inspectors. They know you lied." "Great," I said, crossing my arms. "What do I get for my trouble? A bullet in the head." "You get to live," he said, as if it were a simple transaction. "But I can't leave. Not yet. They're watching the streets." He glanced at the front window. "I need a place to stay, just until dawn." I stared at him. When he was asking to stay. Here, in my diner, all night, my mind raced. This was insane. This was how people disappeared. This was how waitresses ended up in dumpsters. And then my eyes fell on the counter. Next to his terrifying brick phone, my unopened mail. On top of the pile was the bill from the little gray home, the nursing facility where my mother lived. The red past due stamp was like a punch to the gut. I thought of her, sitting in that sterile room, staring at a wall, and the bill I couldn't pay. I thought of my rent, already 2 weeks late. I looked back at the man. He was danger, he was death. But those men in the long coats, they were something else, something worse. And I was desperate. "There's an attic," I said, my voice flat, "above the storeroom. It's just for old stock. Holiday decorations, broken chairs. It's dusty." "It'll do," he said. "Fine," I said. "You can stay until Mags and I leave. That's at dawn, 5 a.m. In return, what's to stop those inspectors from coming back tomorrow and burning this place to the ground? What about Mags? What about me?" "In return," he said, "they won't touch this place. They won't touch you. They won't touch Mags." He nodded at my cook, who was watching this whole exchange with a frighteningly calm expression. "You have my word." Your word, I laughed. A short, ugly sound. And who are you? He ignored the question. I need your phone. I hesitated, then pulled my cheap, cracked-screen smartphone from my apron. He took it, his fingers barely grazing mine. His skin was cold. He didn't use my phone. He just looked at the back of it, at the sticker with the network provider's logo. Then he picked up his own brick phone. His thumbs moved with blurring speed, typing a long, complex string of commands. It wasn't a text message. It looked like code. I thought he was calling his crew, arranging for pickup, maybe sending a picture of me and Mags as insurance. I had no idea that he was setting something in motion. A silent, underground transaction that was already snaking its way through networks I didn't even know existed. He finished typing and placed the phone back on the counter. Outside, the rain had eased, and in the distance, I could hear sirens. They were faint, heading away from us, toward the docks. The danger had passed. For now. I looked at the clock on the wall. The neon blue Mercury logo hummed above it. The long, red second hand swept upward. It was 2:17 in the morning. My shift was over, but the night, I realized, was just getting started. The attic stairs were steep and narrow, hidden behind a door in the dry storeroom. I flicked the light switch, and a single, naked bulb illuminated a graveyard of diner history. Broken chairs, boxes of holiday tinsel that had seen better decades, and an old army cot covered in a dusty drop cloth. It's not much, I said, my voice echoing in the small space. He didn't seem to hear me. He climbed the stairs, moving with a stiff, pained grace, and went straight to the cot. He sat on the edge, the springs groaning a loud protest. He leaned forward, bracing his elbows on his knees, his head bowed. He was breathing heavily, the sound tight. You're bleeding through your suit, I stated, the obvious hanging in the air. I'll get the first aid kit. Scissors, he commanded, his voice muffled, and leave the attic door cracked. I returned with the diner's oversized metal first aid kit, the one Mags kept stocked for kitchen burns and knife slips. I knelt on the dusty floorboards in front of him. The space was suddenly very small. I was too close. I could smell the damp wool of his suit, the cold night air clinging to him, and the sharp, coppery tang of his blood. You need to take the jacket off, I said, trying to sound professional, like the pre-med students who used to study here. He grunted, wincing, as he slowly peeled the ruined, expensive fabric off his broad shoulders. The white shirt underneath was destroyed, plastered to his side with a stain that was a terrible, dark crimson. The shirt, too. I can't see the wound. His fingers fumbled with the buttons, his right arm held rigidly against his body. He gave up and simply pulled the shirt open, the sound of tearing fabric sharp in the silence. I drew in a breath. This wasn't a bullet hole. It was a cut, a long, deep gash along his ribs, just under his arm. It was terrifyingly clean, as if drawn with a ruler and a scalpel. It had stopped gushing, but it was still weeping. This needs stitches, I whispered, my voice shaking slightly. This needs a hospital. Tape and gauze, he bit out, his jaw tight. It's all you've got. It'll be all I need. This is gonna hurt. Just do it. I opened an antiseptic wipe. The alcohol smell sharp. As I dabbed at the edges of the wound, his entire body went rigid, the muscles in his abdomen clenched like stone. He hissed, a sharp intake of breath, but he didn't make another sound. He just watched me, his gray eyes tracking my every move. I pressed a thick gauze pad against the cut. Hold this, hard. He covered my hand with his own to apply pressure. His palm was calloused and unexpectedly warm, his grip firm. As I worked, taping the pad down, securing the bandage by wrapping it around his torso, that cold, analytical gaze never left my face. What did he call you? He asked, his voice low and rough. I paused, the roll of tape in my hand. Who the silver-haired man? Yes. Sweetheart, I said, the memory stinging. Darling and kid. He called me kid. A humorless, lopsided smile touched one side of his mouth. It vanished as quickly as it came. They always do. They look at you, and they see someone weak, someone they can push. It's their first and last mistake. I'm not weak, I snapped, pulling the tape tighter than I meant to. He didn't even flinch. I'm just stuck. Stuck, he echoed. My mother, I said, suddenly needing to fill the silence, needing him to see I wasn't just some girl he could endanger. She had a stroke. 2 years ago, I was in my final year, East Fall Design Institute. I was going to, design buildings, something that lasted. I sat back on my heels, the empty tape roll in my hand. She can't speak. She can't walk. The insurance ran out after 6 months. So now I work. I work the day shift at the coffee shop on 5th, and I work the graveyard shift here, just to keep her at the little gray home, just to keep the lights on in her room. I shrugged, feeling the familiar weight settle on my shoulders. I'm used to being underestimated. I'm just not used to this. He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't say, I'm sorry, or that's terrible. He just absorbed the information, filed it away. He stood, testing the bandage with a light press of his fingers, and walked to the small, grimy attic window that overlooked the alley. The camera on the corner, he said, his back to me. Is it real or a dummy? I was startled by the sudden shift. What? The pawn shop? The camera on its roof? It's real, I said, but it only records if the shop's alarm is triggered. Delivery schedule. Bread at 4 a.m., dairy at 5:30, linen on Tuesdays. Fire escape. Rusty, I said, drops into the alley by the bins. I don't even know if it would hold a person's weight. He just nodded, taking it all in. He wasn't making conversation. He was building a map, calculating exits. He was the kind of man who never sat in a room without knowing exactly how to get out of it. He's right, Mag's voice came from the bottom of the stairs, making me jump. Ronan tensed, his hand instinctively moving to his uninjured side before he realized who it was. Mags climbed the steps, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. They see a girl, Mags said, handing one mug to me. They don't see the steal. He offered the other to Ronan. Ronan took it, his eyes meeting Mags over the rim. There was a moment of silent understanding between the 2 men that I couldn't penetrate. Mags, with his tired eyes and flour-dusted apron, looked at this dangerous man with a complete lack of fear. It was recognition. I haven't seen fake badges like that since the Doc 9 war, Mags said quietly, his gaze distant. Those boys weren't just muscle. They were official, wrong but official. As if on cue, a tinny voice drifted up from the kitchen. Mags always kept a small, battery-powered radio on the spice shelf, tuned to the all-night news broadcast. Still unfolding at the Bluestone Pier, the announcer's voice crackled. Sources report a major security breach at a private holding vault, while officials remain tight-lipped. Estimates of the loss are in the millions. The shadowy Lantern Court organization is rumored to be the target of the audacious heist. Ronan, who had been perfectly still, let out a short, sharp breath that might have been a laugh. He turned from the window. They blame me, he said. The pieces slammed together in my head. The fake inspectors, the official-looking badges, the port. The inspectors, I said, my voice barely a whisper. They weren't just thugs. They were from the port. On the Eastport Security Commission, Ronan corrected, his voice flat. The PSCE, they're a private police force, bought and paid for by the Lantern Court. They run Bluestone Pier, and tonight, someone walked in and took their payroll. They think it was me. Was it? The question was out before I could stop it. He just looked at me. I'm here, bleeding, aren't I? It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. But why me, I asked, standing up. Why this diner you ran past a dozen other places? He set the coffee mug down on a stack of old menus. Those other places have managers who would have called the cops, or worse, called the PSCE, looking for a reward. He stepped closer. The attic felt smaller again. You didn't. When that silver-haired bastard flashed his fake gold, you didn't bow. You didn't scrape. He was very close now. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, fighting the attic chill. You did the hardest thing a person can do in this city, he said, his voice dropping. You saw a badge. You knew it was wrong, and you said no. That's rare. It means you're either very brave or very stupid. I'm feeling pretty stupid right now, I mumbled. We need to erase the trail. He was all business again. The alley, my arrival, your wine spill lie won't hold if they bring dogs. What do we do? The diner has a back patio. Doesn't it, an outdoor space? Yeah, it's just some cracked pavement and dead planters. We never use it. Does it have sprinklers for the planters? I think so, on a timer for the summer. Go, he ordered. Set them to go off at exactly 3 a.m., not 3:01, 3 sharp. The water running off the patio will wash the alley. It'll mix with the rain. It'll destroy any scent, wash away any trace. It'll look like a malfunction. I stared at him. The level of detail, the precise timing. He wasn't just hiding. He was directing. He was stage managing the entire scene, using my diner as his set. I turned to leave, but I froze. As he moved, his shirt, still open, shifted. Tucked against his skin, half hidden by the watch on his left wrist, was a thin, silver chain. It was simple, almost delicate, and looked out of place on a man so hard. Dangling from it were 2 small, stamped letters, M.K. The detail was so personal, so unexpected, that I couldn't look away. He saw me looking. His eyes went cold. He immediately pulled his shirt closed, covering the chain. His expression shuddered and dangerous. Go, he repeated, his voice harder this time. I fled down the stairs, my heart pounding. Mags was already at the breaker box, his fingers flying across the timer switches. Sprinklers, he muttered. 3 a.m. Done. He'd heard everything. I went back to the front, to the register, needing to do something normal. My hands were still shaking. I picked up my phone to check the time. The screen was dark. I pressed the power button. A notification from my banking app was lit up. Great, I thought, probably another overdraft fee. I opened the app, my thumb hovering, but it wasn't an overdraft warning. Alert, an incoming wire transfer is pending approval. Please review. I frowned. A wire transfer, I clicked it. Pending deposit. I almost laughed. It must be my tax refund. Finally, it was usually just a couple $100. But right now, a couple $100 felt like a lifeline. I dismissed the notification, shaking my head. I'd deal with it tomorrow, if I lived that long. I looked out the front window, past the flickering blue neon. The rain had slowed to a miserable drizzle. The street was empty, washed clean in the pale streetlight. No, not empty. Across the street, parked in a commercial loading zone, was a white truck, a windowless, refrigerated box truck, like the ones that delivered meat or ice. Its lights were off, its engine was cold, but it hadn't been there an hour ago. I felt him before I saw him. Ronan was suddenly standing at my shoulder, his presence a heavy weight. I hadn't even heard him come down the stairs. He stared at the truck, his body absolutely still. They haven't given up, he said, his voice flat. I swallowed, the sound loud in my own ears. The fear, which had receded into a dull throb, came flooding back, cold and sharp. They were just sitting there, waiting for us to leave. This wasn't just about surviving until dawn. This was about what came after. You said they wouldn't touch this place, I said, my voice trembling. You said I'd be safe. I said I'd keep you safe, he corrected, his eyes never leaving the truck. The night's not over. No, I said, the word coming out stronger than I felt. He turned to look at me, his gaze intense. No, I said again, the image of that past due bill from the nursing home flashing in my mind, the image of my mother, alone in that room, unable to ask for help. Your word isn't good enough, not if they're sitting out there. You pulled me into this. You pulled Mags in. My fear wasn't gone, but it was crystallizing. It was turning into something hard, something I could use. It was turning into leverage. If I'm tied to you, I said, meeting his gaze, forcing my voice to stay low and steady. If those things in that truck think I'm your friend, Then they're going to come for me. And when they do, they're going to find out what I care about. His expression didn't change, but his focus was entirely on me now. So, we have a new deal, I said. You don't just protect this diner, you don't just protect me, you protect her. My mother. If I'm caught in your storm, you have to be her anchor. You have to guarantee her safety, no matter what happens to me, no matter what. I expected him to argue, to tell me it was impossible, that I was asking too much from a man with a knife wound in his side. He just held my gaze for a long, heavy moment. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the ice machine and the distant drip of the rain. Her name, he finally asked. Elaine, I said, my throat tight. Elaine Keats. He nodded once, a short, sharp, final gesture. Remembered. I watched the red second hand on the wall clock. It wasn't ticking. It was crawling. Each click was a hammer blow in the pressurized silence of the diner. Ronan was a ghost in the back hallway, a shape of deeper black against the shadows. Mags stood by the sinks, wiping his hands on an apron he'd already taken off. Across the street, the white refrigerated truck sat, a silent, white tombstone, waiting. My gaze snapped back to the clock. The second hand hit the 12. 3 a.m. For one agonizing second, nothing happened. Then, from the breaker box by the pantry, came a loud, mechanical clack. Outside, on the cracked, weed-choked back patio, the sprinkler system I hadn't seen work in 5 years exploded to life. It wasn't a gentle watering. It was a high-pressure, chaotic spray, jets of water hammering the concrete, the brick walls, and the alley beyond. The motion sensor. Ronan's voice cut through the dark. You left it on. It's sensitive, I whispered, my heart hammering. A stray cat sets it off. As if I had summoned them. 2 figures detached themselves from the deeper gloom of the alley. They were moving fast, crouching low. Not the inspectors from before. These were men in black, all hard angles and no wasted motion. They cut across the alley and hit the edge of the patio. Wham! A 200-watt floodlight I'd screwed in myself last month ignited, bathing them in a stark, merciless white. They froze, cursing, hands flying up to shield their faces. They were completely blind, caught between the sudden, blinding light and the unexpected downpour from the sprinklers. Kitchen, now, Ronan commanded. We melted back. Mags was already there, his face pale in the faint blue glow from the front, but his hands were steady. Ronan moved to the hallway, the narrow passage that led to the storeroom, the alley door, and the attic stairs. He reached up, his movements economical. With a sharp twist, the single naked bulb in the hallway ceiling went out. The click was deafening. The back half of the diner was plunged into absolute darkness. Ronan didn't hide. He braced himself in the doorway, pressing his shoulder against the frame, using the shadow of the door jamb itself as cover. I flattened myself against the cold, humming stainless steel of the ice machine. I could hear Ronan's breathing. It wasn't fast. It wasn't panicked. It was slow, rhythmic, measured. He was counting. A new sound at the back door, louder than the hiss of the sprinklers, a scrape of metal, a click, a jiggle, a universal key. The heavy steel door groaned open. 2 beams from high-powered flashlights sliced through the dark. They were sharp, blue-white cones, cutting across the prep tables, glinting off the hanging copper pots, illuminating the floor. Clear, one of them whispered. His voice was muffled, tight. He's not here. Check the storage, the other said, and the attic. The truck saw movement. He's in here. The beams moved. One swept the main kitchen, the light flashing across Mags's frozen form. The other pointed straight down the dark hallway, toward Ronan, toward the attic stairs. The man stepped into the hallway. Clear, he muttered. He found the pull-down cord for the attic ladder. He yanked it. The old wooden stairs unfolded with a dusty, protesting squeal. He was close. I could smell the damp night air on his tactical gear. He put his boot on the first rung. His flashlight beam was aimed up, into the dark, empty space where he thought his target was hiding. He couldn't see Ronan, pressed into the doorframe less than a foot from his shoulder. The man's boot hit the third step, then the fourth. Ronan moved. He didn't attack the man, and he attacked the ladder. He grabbed the metal side rail with both hands and pulled. It was a single, violent, twisting jerk, leveraging his entire body weight. The aging lag bolt holding the rail to the wall tore free from the dry plaster with a sound like a gunshot. The ladder didn't just collapse, it twisted sideways, ripping itself apart. The man yelled, a high, sharp sound of pure surprise. His balance was gone. He windmilled, his arms flailing, and fell backward. He hit the hard tile floor of the hallway with a sickening, final thud. His flashlight skittered away, spinning across the floor, making the shadows jump and dance like mad puppets. His weapon, a compact black handgun, flew from his grasp and slid across the checkerboard tile, stopping just inches from my foot. I didn't breathe. I lunged forward and kicked it. I put everything I had into that kick. The gun rocketed across the floor and vanished under the heavy commercial deep freeze. The man on the floor wasn't getting up. He was clutching his wrist, his whole body curled in on itself. A low, wet, groaning sound was being forced from his throat. I heard it when he landed, a distinct wet snap. He wasn't dead, but he was done fighting. "Mitch status," the second intruder yelled from the pantry area. He got no answer but the agonized groan. He reappeared, his flashlight beam sweeping frantically. Finding his partner on the ground, the beam snapped up, finding me. "You," he roared, and the light blinded me. He raised his weapon, not at me, at the ceiling, a warning. The bang was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It wasn't a noise, it was a physical blow. I felt it in my chest, in my teeth. Plaster dust and bits of acoustic tile rained down from the ceiling, the air suddenly tasting like chalk and sulfur. Before I could even process the sound, Ronan was on me. He crossed the kitchen in 2 bounds, grabbed the front of my apron in one fist, and hauled me backward. I slammed into his hard chest as he spun us both behind the main service counter. "Stay down," he hissed in my ear, his voice a low growl. The intruder fired again, cracked this time at the counter. The bullet tore a fist-sized chunk of laminate from the edge, precisely where my head had been a second before. Shards of particle board sprayed my face. "Mags now," Ronan yelled. He didn't wait for mags. He grabbed the big, red fire extinguisher from its wall mount under the counter. With one practiced motion, he pulled the pin. "Cover your face." He rose from behind the counter just enough to aim and squeeze the handle. A thick, choking cloud of white chemical foam erupted into the kitchen. The intruder roared in surprise and anger as his vision was instantly, completely obscured. The white fog filled the air, stinging my nose, making it impossible to breathe. Through the fog, I heard another sound, a loud, deep hiss. Mags. He had spun the industrial tap on the commercial dishwasher line, a massive cloud of scalding. Thick steam billowed out from the back. Mixing with the chemical foam, the kitchen in an instant became a blinding, hot, white hell. "My eyes, I can't see," the intruder shouted, coughing violently. I heard him stumbling backward, knocking over a stack of metal trays. "He's on his radio," Ronan said, his voice low and urgent. Right by my ear, I could hear the faint, panicked shouting of the man calling for backup. "We can't be here when they arrive. We have to go. Now." "The front," I choked, my lungs on fire. "The truck. They're watching." "The trash alley," Mag said, appearing like a ghost from the steam, his face grim. "It opens onto Mulberry, 2 blocks down." "Go!" Ronan pushed me toward the front. "Nina, lock it. Hi!" I scrambled to my feet. Mags was already at the front door, throwing the deadbolt from the inside, plunging the diner into its final darkness. I grabbed my keys from the hook and my thin jacket. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't work the zipper. The diner. My God, the diner. They'd come back. They'd see the bullet holes, the foam, the man on the floor. I grabbed a napkin from the dispenser and the pen from my apron. I scribbled on it. My writing barely legible, boss pipe burst over the stove. Total flood, called emergency plumber, don't touch anything. It was flimsy, pathetic, but it was an alibi for the water, the steam, the chemical mess. It might buy us an hour. It might save Mags's job. I locked the front door and slid the diner's main key into the secure mail slot for the morning manager, a last act of normalcy. "Nina, now," Mags called from the back. I ran. Mags led us through the back pantry, stepping cleanly over the groaning man, and yanked open a narrow side door I'd only ever used to take out the trash. It opened into a gap between two brick buildings, slick with old grease and smelling of rotten vegetables. The cold, clean air was a shock. The rain had stopped. We ran, our footsteps echoing off the wet brick. We emerged onto Mulberry Street. It was dead, empty. My car, a beat-up 10-year-old blue hatchback, was parked under a flickering orange streetlight. I fumbled with the key, my fingers numb and useless. "I drive," I said, my voice shaking. Mags didn't argue. Then he took the passenger seat. Ronan was too tall for my car. He folded his long, lean frame into the back seat, his knees pressed hard against the back of my driver's seat. The car, which usually smelled like stale coffee and floor mats, was instantly filled with his presence. The smell of damp wool, rain, and something sharp, almost antiseptic, nitrile, like the gloves in the first aid kit. I jammed the key in the ignition. The engine turned over, coughed, and died. Come on, I pleaded. I tried again. The engine caught, roaring to life with a rattle. "Go," Ronan said, his voice perfectly calm from the darkness behind me. "Drive normally. Don't speed. Head toward the Hollow Key district." I pulled away from the curb, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I didn't speed. I stopped at the red light at the end of the block. The street completely empty. My body was screaming at me to run. As I sat there, waiting for the light to change, I turned the corner. My rearview mirror gave me a perfect, clear view of the street we'd just left. The refrigerated truck, it was still there. It hadn't moved. The men who attacked us, they weren't from that truck. My blood went cold. As I watched, its headlights flashed on, brights, but it didn't follow us. It just sat. The PSCE guys, the inspectors, were one team. The men in black tactical gear were a second team. And this truck. On the back door of the truck, catching the dim orange light from the street lamp, someone had drawn a symbol in white chalk. It was crude but chillingly clear. A bird of prey, a hawk, or maybe a kestrel, sketched in profile. Its eye a single, malevolent dot. "They're not PSCE, I whispered, my eyes glued to the mirror. "The men in the truck." "No," Ronan's voice came from the back seat. "They're not—" "Who are they?" Mags asked, his voice low and grim. "The Kestrels," Ronan said. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it, like he was tasting poison, told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't just hiding a man who'd been in a fight. I was in the middle of a war I didn't understand. The Lantern Court, the PSCE, and now the Kestrels. Eastfall wasn't a city. It was a goddamn board game. The light turned green. And Nina Keats, a waitress in a 10-year-old car with a wounded mafia boss in the back, was suddenly the one holding the king. My foot pressed down on the accelerator. Just a little harder. We drove the first 10 blocks in a ringing silence. The car still smelling of chemical smoke and adrenaline. The world outside was a blue-black blur. Mags didn't speak until we hit his neighborhood on the south side. "Here," he said, tapping the dashboard. 2 blocks over. This is good." I pulled the hatchback over to a curb piled high with black garbage bags. Mags got out. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't look at Ronan in the back seat. He just put one rough, flour-dusted hand on my shoulder and squeezed. "You did good, kid," he said, his voice low. "Now you keep your head all the way down, you hear me?" "Mags," I started, but he was already gone, swallowed by the alleyways and pre-dawn gloom like he'd never been there at all. I was alone with him. Hollow Key. He'd said I drove. Hollow Key wasn't a neighborhood, it was a scar. It was a row of ancient red brick tenements pressed so hard against the elevated train tracks that the whole world vibrated when a cargo train rumbled past. It was the end of the line. My apartment was the attic unit, 4 flights of narrow stairs that smelled of stale cabbage, damp plaster, and defeat. I fumbled with the 3 deadbolts, 1, 2, 3, and pushed the door open onto my life. It was one room with a ceiling that sloped so sharply on one side you couldn't stand up straight. A mattress on the floor in one corner, a hot plate, a mini fridge, and a single metal shelf for food in the other. A rickety bookshelf held my old design textbooks and my mother's paperbacks. It wasn't a home, it was a holding cell. Ronan stepped inside, and the small room seemed to shrink by half. He was too large, too dark, too real for this space. He moved past my single chair, past the mattress, and went straight to the window. It was a single, grime-caked pane of glass that overlooked the silver, skeletal spine of the train tracks. He stood there for a long time, watching the empty street 4 stories below. I just stood by the door, my keys still in my hand, my body thrumming with a painful, vibrating exhaustion. "I only have mint tea," I said. My voice sounded thin. Alien. He nodded, his back still to me. I plugged in the electric kettle, the small click loud in the silence. My hands were starting to shake. Badly. The adrenaline that had held me together at the diner was draining away, leaving a cold, trembling void. He turned from the window. His eyes scanned the room, cataloging everything, the threadbare rug, the single bare bulb overhead, and then his gaze landed on my whiteboard. It was the only organized thing in my life, mounted on the only good patch of wall, at the top, in black marker, little gray home, below it. The visiting hours, 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., daily, and under that, my mother's name, Elaine Keats, room 304. Next to her name, circled in angry red bill, due October 20th. Past due. He stepped closer to it. He didn't look at the past due notice. He just looked at her name. Elaine Keats, nod, he said. The New Deal. The anchor. She was a nurse. I said, I couldn't stop the words. I needed him to see. An ER nurse for 30 years. She saved people. Every day. Then the stroke. It took her words. Aphasia. She knows what she wants to say. She just can't. She's trapped. I busied myself with the tea bags, my back to him, fighting the tightness in my throat. The insurance ran out after 6 months, so here. I gestured vaguely at the room. At my life. She doesn't remember much, now. But she remembers music. Jazz. I pointed to a small, cloth-covered radio on the bookshelf. It's all I've really got. He walked over to it. It was an old thing. Maybe from the 1950s, with a dial that glowed a dim yellow. He turned it on. Static filled the room. He twisted the dial slowly, past the angry late-night talk shows, past the crackling void. And then he found it. A saxophone, slow and mournful, and then a voice. Billie Holiday. God bless the child that's got his own. That voice, full of smoke and whiskey and a deep, beautiful sorrow, filled my tiny, sad apartment. The room, which had always felt like a bare cage, suddenly felt full. It had a soul. The kettle clicked off. I poured the steaming water into 2 mugs. When I turned around, he was standing in the middle of the room, looking at his side. The bandage I'd applied in the attic was ruined, the fight, the running, the escape it was soaked through. A dark, ugly patch of crimson was spreading across the white gauze. You're bleeding again, I whispered. Sit down. He sat on the edge of my mattress, the only place to sit. I grabbed the first aid kit from my bag, the one I'd thrown in as we fled. I knelt on the floor in front of him. It was the second time in one night, but this wasn't the dusty attic. This was my home. The air was different. It was intimate, quiet, and terrifying. I tore open a new pack of antiseptic wipes. My hands, I couldn't control them. They were shaking violently, the plastic wrapper crackling like fire. I couldn't get the sterile gauze pad open. "I can't," I stammered, frustrated, ashamed. "My fingers, they won't." "Easy." He reached out. His left hand. He didn't take the gauze from me. He just placed his hand over both of mine, pressing them against his knee. His hand was large, the skin on his palm rough and calloused, but the grip was so light it was barely there. He wasn't restraining me. He was anchoring me. "It's okay," he said. His voice was low, the gravel softened by the music. "Breathe, Nina." I closed my eyes. I took one deep, shuddering breath. The air I let out was shaky and broken. His hand was steady, solid, warm. It was the first human touch I'd felt all night that wasn't violence or urgency. It was comfort. When I opened my eyes, my hands were still. "Okay," I whispered. I cleaned the wound again, my movements sure this time. I applied the fresh bandage, wrapping the tape around his torso. He never flinched. He just watched my face. As I finished, my eyes fell on his ruined suit jacket, which he'd tossed onto my single chair. The lining, near the armhole, was ripped, but it had been repaired. The stitches were thick, black, and uneven. They weren't pretty, but they were strong. "You sew?" I asked, lightly touching the rough thread. He glanced at the jacket. "I don't trust anyone else to touch my things." It wasn't a boast, it was a confession, a life sentence of isolation. "You learn to do for yourself," he said, his gaze drifting back to the window. "I grew up in Saltfield, over by the docks. You learn fast. You learn to check your exits before you even sit down. You learn to patch your own clothes. You learn to always keep your back to a wall." I thought of the silver chain. "M.K.," I said, the words out before I could stop them. He went rigid. He turned his head slowly, his gray eyes locking onto mine. The fragile piece was gone, replaced by that cold, deep void. "My sister," he said, his voice flat, utterly devoid of emotion. "Margot, she's gone. A warehouse explosion years ago." He touched his left wrist. A ghost of a gesture, a reflex. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Billie Holiday's lament. I felt like I had trespassed, walked into a room I had no right to be in. I sank onto the floor, pulling my knees to my chest, my back against the bookshelf. "They always see me as the weak girl," I whispered, the confession torn from me. "Those inspectors, the men at the diner tonight, my professors, when I had to drop out. Poor, weak Nina. I'm so tired of being the person things happen to." He watched me, his expression unreadable. "Vulnerable isn't weak," he said, his voice quiet but with an intensity that vibrated in the air. "It's just a position. It's the space you're in before someone stands beside you." Drip. I froze. Drip. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," I groaned. I looked up. On the plaster wall, right above my mattress, a dark, spider-webbing water stain was spreading. The storm had finally found a way in. A steady drip-drip of water was landing right on my pillow. "The roof," I said, dropping my head into my hands. "The landlord never fixes it. He just paints over it." I looked up. Ronan was already on his feet, assessing the new enemy. "The bookcase," he said, pointing. "What?" "We move the bookcase, cover the leak, put the mattress against the opposite wall." "It's too heavy," I protested, "and you're hurt." "I'll take the heavy end." Before I could argue, he had his good shoulder braced against the particle board shelf. I scrambled to grab the other side. With a long, groaning scrape, we shoved the heavy unit across the floor. We angled it against the leaking wall. The drip, drip, drip now landed on the top shelf, on a stack of old textbooks. We stood back, both of us breathing hard, covered in dust. The bookcase looked ridiculous, slanted against the wall, and the water, it simply trickled down the side of the shelf, creating a new, winding river across the floorboards. It was the final absurdity. A mafia boss and a waitress fighting a leak after fighting for our lives. A laugh bubbled up in my throat. It was a wild, exhausted, half-hysterical sound. I couldn't stop it. I looked at him. Ronan Hale, His $1 million suit was ruined, covered in plaster dust and chemical foam, and the smallest, most genuine smile I had ever seen cracked the ice on his face. He laughed. It was a short, rough, quiet sound, but it was real. We stood in my ruined apartment at 4 a.m, and we laughed. The moment stretched, and then it broke. My phone, which I had plugged in by the hot plate, began to vibrate on the floor. It wasn't just one buzz. It was a series. Buzz, buzz, buzz. An insistent, angry, rapid-fire burst of notifications. My stomach dropped. That wasn't a text message. That was an alarm. "What is it?" he asked, his smile gone. "I don't know." I picked it up. My hands were steady now. The screen was filled with alerts from my banking app, not the pending deposit I'd seen hours ago. These were new. Alert, your balance has experienced a significant change. Alert, a transfer from Orion Transfer Network has been completed. Orion Transfer Network. My heart wasn't just pounding, it was trying to escape my chest. I opened the app, the screen loaded. I stared, I blinked, I read the number, I read it again, and a third time, my mind refusing to process the zeros. 1, 2, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. $1,200,000. The phone slipped from my fingers. It hit the floorboards with a sharp clack. "Nina," Ronan's voice was sharp, cutting through the fog in my head. "What did you do?" I whispered. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the floor, where my phone screen still glowed with that impossible number. "What did you do?" I was screaming now, scrambling to my feet. "What is this? Is this the money from the heist? Is this blood money?" "It's insurance," he said. He was perfectly calm, standing by the window as if we were discussing the rain. "I can't," I was hysterical, pacing the tiny room, my hands pulling at my hair. "I can't have this. They'll arrest me. They'll freeze my accounts. I have to send it back. How do I send it back?" "You can't," he said simply. "The Orion Network isn't a bank. It's a ledger. The transaction is final. It's your money." "My money," I whirled on him. "Why? Why would you do this, to buy my silence?" "No," he said, turning to face me. His gray eyes were intense, pinning me in place. "Because of what I told you. They see you as weak. The PSCE, the Kestrels. They think they can buy you. They'd come to you with $10,000, maybe 20, to find out where I went. They'd threaten your mother, and you'd be trapped." He took one step closer. "Now, you're not trapped. Now, they have nothing to offer you. They can't buy you. They can't threaten you, because I've already bought your safety." I flinched back as if he'd struck me. "You bought me. This is a down payment on my soul." "No," he snapped, his voice sharp, cutting through my panic. "It's freedom. It's get your mother out of the little gray home and into the best facility in the country money. It's disappear and never work a double shift again. Money." He stopped, just a foot from me. "The choice. Nina is still yours. It was always yours. You can burn it. You can give it to charity. Or you can use it to survive. But you are not vulnerable anymore." I just stared at him, my breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. $1,200,000. The silence in the room was absolute, heavier than the waterlogged plaster, thicker than the chemical fog. Billie Holiday's song had ended. The only sound was the drip of the leak onto my textbook. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The sky was turning a sick, bruised purple. From the tracks below, a long, mournful whistle echoed through the pre-dawn air. The first cargo train of the day, leaving Eastfall. Time was moving. The night was over. And my life, in every way that mattered, had just ended or just begun. I couldn't tell the difference. The glow from my phone screen lit the dusty floor. $1,200,000. It wasn't a rescue. It was a declaration of war. It was a glowing neon sign painted on my back, visible from every dark corner of Eastfall. "The Orion Network," Ronan said, his voice quiet, pulling me from the numerical shock. "It's not just a ledger. It's a loudspeaker. That kind of transfer. Unauthorized, unvetted, it screams. By now, the word is out." I looked up, my throat dry. What word? That the money I supposedly stole from the Bluestone Pier vault wasn't stolen from me. It was for you. He crossed his arms, the fresh white bandage a stark contrast to his dark shirt, now covered in plaster dust. The Shadow Exchange, they're an information market. They trade in secrets. And right now, your name, Nina Keats, is the most valuable commodity on their board. You're not the waitress who saw too much. You're Hale's contact. As if summoned by the name, my phone vibrated on the floor. It wasn't the bank. It was a text message. Unknown number. My heart didn't stop. It just turned to ice. My fingers felt numb as I picked it up. The message was short, brutal, and efficient. We know about Elaine. Little gray home. Room 304. Trade us Hale. You have 1 hour. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just erased. I hit the delete button with such force that my thumb ached, but I couldn't erase the words from my head. Room 304. They knew her room number. The money, the inspectors, the men in the alley. That was fear. This was a violation. This was a scalpel sliding between my ribs. What? Ronan demanded. He hadn't moved, but his entire posture had shifted. He was no longer a man resting. He was a predator, coiled. They know, I whispered, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. They know about my mother, her name, the home, her room. He nodded, a single, sharp dip of his chin. The cold fury in his gray eyes was terrifying, but it wasn't aimed at me. They're fast, he said, but they're desperate. They're trying to scare you, to make you run. They're still treating you like the weak girl. They don't understand the rules of the game just changed. This isn't a game, Ronan. It's always a game, he corrected, his voice sharp. They just made a bad move. Now we make ours. He needed a map. My apartment had nothing. He walked to my pathetic kitchenette, grabbed my half-empty box of sugar packets, and spilled them on the floor. He took my black whiteboard marker. He began laying them out in a pattern, drawing on the bare wood. This is the port, he said, placing a packet in the center. This is the lantern court, he tapped it. Old money, old blood. They've run the docks for 50 years. They think they are Eastfall. He drew an arrow to another packet. This is the Bluestone Logistics Clearance Committee, the BLCC. They're the official side. They sign the manifests, inspect the cargo, clear the shipments. The BLCC loses a container of electronics. The Lantern Court finds it. A perfect symbiotic relationship. The inspectors, I said, the PSCE. The Lantern Court's private army, he confirmed. They have badges. They have authority. But they answer to the Lantern Court, not the city. And the Kestrels, I asked? The image of that chalkbird making my skin crawl. The men in the alley, the truck. His expression darkened. The Kestrels are the problem. He placed another packet far to the side. They're new blood. They're chaos. They don't want to just steal cargo. They want to burn the port. They're the ones who hit the Bluestone vault, not me. They stole the Lantern Court's emergency funds, and they're using my name as a smokescreen. They want a war. So the men at the diner were Kestrels, wearing fake PSCE gear, trying to flush me out and pin the whole thing on me, he finished. And the refrigerated truck, Rutherford Ice, Unit 17. That's their transport. A cover company, Seagull Logistics. They move their strike teams around the city, pretending to be a frozen fish delivery. My phone rang again. This time, the sound was a relief. The caller ID flashed Mags. I snatched it up. Mags, are you okay? Are you home? I'm fine, kid. His voice was a low rumble, exhausted. Don't you worry about me, but you need to listen. They're asking questions. Who, the Kestrels? No. Worse. Suits, men from downtown. My blood chilled. They're not cops, but they're talking like lawyers. They're floating some new ordinance, the Crossport Civil Adjudication, the CCAJ. They're using words like anti-money laundering and asset seizure. I looked at Ronan, my hand tight on the phone. They're trying to freeze my account. Exactly, Mags said. They know about the money. They can't find you, so they're trying to cut off your escape. They lock that account. You're trapped. They think it'll force you to trade." "I know what they think." I cut him off. "Mags, stay inside. Don't answer your door. For anyone." I hung up. The walls of my tiny apartment were pressing in. They were coming from all sides. A street war from the Kestrels, a political threat from the Lantern Court, and a personal, sickening threat against my mother. Ronan was already moving. He sat on the edge of my mattress, pulled off his heavy black boot, and with a small, sharp knife I hadn't seen until that moment, he slit a seam in the thick leather sole. He pulled out a thin, black card. It wasn't plastic. It felt like metal, cold and heavy, with a gold chip on one side and a single engraved word, Aurelia. He pressed it into my palm. My fingers closed around it. "They can't freeze what's not in the system," or he said, "the little gray home is compromised. We move her. Now." "Move her where, how?" "The Aurelia key," he said, tapping the card. "The old Chiron library on Argyle, the one that's been boarded up for 20 years. 3rd floor, history section. Find the book, The Rise and Fall of Eastfall. Behind it is a private deposit box. That key is the only thing that opens it." "What's in it?" I whispered. "A new life," he said, his voice flat. "Passports, transport papers, a medical transfer to a private clinic in Montreal, all of it clean, all of it paid for, new names for you and Elaine Keats. It's underground legal, untraceable. You can walk in there, take the papers, and by sunrise, you and your mother can be ghosts." I looked at the black card. It was my escape. Everything I wanted. Freedom, safety from my mother, a way out. I closed my fist around it, and I looked him right in the eyes. "No," I said. He froze. "No." "I'm not running." My voice was low, and for the first time in my life, it was as hard as his. "I'm not becoming bait. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life checking over my shoulder, wondering if they'll find her, wondering if they'll find me. You said this money bought my freedom. Freedom isn't running. Ronan, it's finishing the fight. I want a clean end. I want this over." He stared at me for a long, heavy 10 seconds. The air crackled. The strategist in his eyes was seeing a piece on the board he hadn't accounted for. Me. He finally nodded, a slow, dangerous smile touching his lips. "A clean end," he repeated. "Fine." He picked up the marker again. "Then we don't run. We hit them where they live, not their muscle, not their politicians, their finances." "We," I said. "It's just you and me. Mags is out. We need a team. My people are being hunted. We need ghosts." "I know too," I said, the words surprising me. "Maybe." "Who?" "Piper. Piper Lowe." I thought of the pale, exhausted girl with the rings under her eyes, huddled in booth 4 at 4 a.m. She's a programmer, a hacker. She's got chronic insomnia. She used to come into the diner, and I'd let her charge her laptop for hours and forget to charge her for the bottomless coffee. She owes me. "A hacker," Ronan said. "Good. Who else?" "Zev. Zev Carr. He's a courier, a driver. He boasts he can get from the docks to Hollow Key in 15 minutes and never show up on a single traffic camera. Says he has an analog map of the city in his head." "A wheelman," Ronan said. "Perfect." He looked at my phone. "Call them. Tell them it's a consulting fee. Tell them I'll wire them 10% of that money in your account if they give us exactly 24 hours. My hands didn't shake as I dialed. Piper picked up on the first ring, her voice a sleepy, suspicious rasp. "Nina, it's 5 in the morning. "Piper, I need your help, and I can pay you $120,000. Silence. Then a sharp, awake voice. "I'm listening." "I need you to hack the Port Security Commission's digital manifests." Ronan took the phone. "They're moving a shipment tonight, but they're hiding it under a dummy container code. I need the real schedule." "PSCE," Piper scoffed. "Their servers are a joke. Give me 10 minutes. "Next," I called Zev. He just laughed. "Nina Keats, calling me at this hour. This must be good." "Zev, I need a driver. One night, and I'm paying." I told him the number. The laughter stopped. Holy, he whispered, a clean 120K Nina. What did you do? Just drive, Zev, no questions. For that price. I'll drive you to the moon. Where's the target? Ronan took the phone again. Seagull Logistics, Rutherford Ice, Unit 17. They're prepping a shipment of detergent. I need eyes on it. I need to know what's really in those trucks. Done, Zev said, and the line went dead. Ronan turned back to me. Now, your part. He pointed to my phone. That $1,200,000. It's not just a shield. It's a weapon. You're going to use it to set the trap. How? Piper will get you access to the shadow exchange, and you, he said, are going to place a bid, a very public, very loud bid. A bid for what? For the one thing the Lantern Court is desperate to keep quiet, he said, a cold smile touching his lips. The real shipment, the one they're smuggling tonight. You're going to signal to the entire underworld that Hale's contact is using the money I stole to buy the very cargo the Lantern Court is trying to move. I saw it, the elegance of it. It was beautiful and terrible. They'll panic, I whispered, the plan clicking into place. The Lantern Court will think you're trying to double-cross them and steal their shipment. The Kestrels will see it, he added. They'll think I'm trying to fence the money, and they'll want their cut, or they'll want to take the prize for themselves. It'll draw everyone, and I said, the greedy will try to outbid me, the scared will run. But the ones who are truly desperate, Ronan finished, the ones who pull the strings for both the Kestrels and the PSCE, they'll have to show up in person to stop it, and that's who we want. My phone chimed, a message from Piper. In container G47, marked damaged equipment for salvage. It's moving to Gray Harbor, Pier B, scheduled for pickup at 2300 hours. That's 11 p.m. Ronan nodded. Gray Harbor, Pier B. It'll be locked down tight with PSE guards. I stared at the message. Gray Harbor, Pier B. The Blue Mercury, I said, my heart starting a slow, heavy drumbeat. Our old supplier. Before we switched last year, we used to get our bulk frozen goods from Gray Harbor. I ran to my closet, digging in a box of old purses and pay stubs, and there it was, a cracked, faded piece of plastic with my picture on it. Nina Keats, vendor, Blue Mercury Diner. I still have my old vendor pass, I said, holding it up. It's expired by 6 months, but... Ronan looked at the card, then at me. But the system is old, and Piper, he said, can make that pass an expired in about 30 seconds. He took the card from my hand. He wasn't looking at me like a victim anymore, or a civilian. The Kestrels and the Lantern Court will be watching every boat, every truck, every man, he said. But you, Nina, you're the only one who can walk right in the front door. The day was a blur, a long, vibrating pause between the terror of the escape and the dread of the plan. We didn't sleep. We couldn't. The small attic room became a war room. My laptop, usually reserved for job applications and streaming old movies, was now our window. Piper Lowe, our insomniac ghost, fed us a constant stream of information blueprints of Gray Harbor, PSCE guard rotations, and grainy satellite images. Zev Carr, our analog driver, was a voice on an encrypted line, reporting on the movements of the Rutherford ice truck, which was now parked, cold and silent, in a warehouse just south of the pier. The plan was set. Piper had done her magic. My old expired vendor pass for the Blue Mercury was now, according to the digital manifests of Gray Harbor, a top priority. All-access contractor badge, valid for 24 hours. Zev was in position. Piper was in the system. Ronan and I were the variables. It was 9 p.m., 2 hours to go. I stood by the window, the one that had dripped, the one that overlooked the train tracks. I had changed into the darkest clothes. I owned black jeans, worn black sneakers that wouldn't squeak, and a thin, black zip-up hoodie. I'd tucked my hair up into a beanie. I was a shadow. The Aurelia key was a cold, heavy rectangle in my left pocket. The vendor pass, now a digital time bomb, was in my right. The fear was back. It wasn't the sharp, acidic panic of the diner or the hysterical adrenaline of the chase. This was a new fear. It was a cold, heavy dread that settled in my stomach like wet cement. I kept seeing the text message. We know about Elaine. Room 304. I wasn't just walking in to plant a device. I was walking in as my mother's shield. My hand started to shake. It wasn't the violent, uncontrollable tremor of last night. It was a low-grade hum, a sign that my nerves were frayed down to the wire. I tried to zip up my hoodie, but my fingers fumbled, the small metal pull slipping from my grasp. Stop! His voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence. I hadn't heard him move. He was standing right in front of me. He had spent the day pacing, a caged panther. He was wearing the dark Henley he'd borrowed from me, which was stretched tight across his broad shoulders and the new, thick bandages I'd applied that morning. He'd recovered his trench coat, now dry, and it hung on my single chair, a silent, dark sentinel. He stepped into my space, his body blocking the dim light from the street. He took the zipper pull from my trembling fingers. His hand was steady. He slid it up, slowly, the zip of the metal teeth, the loudest sound in the room. He didn't stop at my chin. His hands moved to the collar, straightening it. He settled the fabric around my neck, and then his calloused, rough fingers brushed the bare, sensitive skin just below my ear. It wasn't a caress. It was an adjustment, a centering. But the touch was electric, a spark, entirely separate from the fear, shot down my spine. It was warm. I shivered, a full-body tremor. He saw it. His hands paused, his fingertips resting on the pulse point of my jaw. His gray eyes, no longer flat and cold, were searching mine. "You're thinking about her," he stated. It wasn't a question. I could only nod. The dread was a cold stone in my throat. "I'm terrified," I whispered. "What if this? What if I fail? What if they're waiting for me? What if they grab me? Ronan, what if they won't?" "You can't promise that," I snapped, the fear making me angry. "You don't know that. I'm a waitress. I'm not this. What if they hurt her because of me?" "Nina," his voice wasn't hard, it was firm. It was the anchor. "Look at me." I met his gaze. "Courage isn't being fearless," he said, his voice so low it vibrated through me. "That's for fools. Courage is knowing exactly what you stand to lose. It's being terrified and stepping forward anyway." The words landed. They sank right into my bones. He was right. That's what I was doing. That's what I'd been doing for 2 years. Every time I paid the bill for the little gray home instead of buying a bus ticket out of this city, I just hadn't known it. The knot in my chest didn't disappear, but it loosened. I could breathe. He didn't move away. We stood there, inches apart. The single bare bulb in the attic was off. The only light came from the orange street lamps 4 stories below and the blinking red safety light on the distant train bridge. I could see our reflections in the grimy window pane, 2 dark shapes against the city. "Oh, this is insane," I breathed, my breath fogging a small, pale circle on the cold glass. "It is," he agreed. His own breath joined mine on the window. My gaze dropped from his eyes to his side. The dark Henley was pulled taut over the thick gauze. Without thinking, my hand came up. My fingers, steady now, touched the bandage through the thin cotton. "Does it?" I whispered. "Does it still hurt?" He didn't move. He didn't even flinch. "It's a reminder," he rumbled, "to be faster." He covered my hand with his. It was the second time he'd done it, the first time. He'd steadied me. This time, he didn't just hold it. He uncurled my fingers from his side and lifted my hand, turning my palm up. He pressed it flat against his chest, over his heart. Under my palm, I felt it thump, thump, thump. It wasn't the frantic bird-wing panic of my own heart. It was a slow, deep, powerful engine. It was steady. It was the calmest thing in the room. I looked up at his face. He was watching me, but the strategist was gone. The coldness was gone. This was just him, the man who sewed his own jacket, the man who wore his sister's initials. The air in the room was no longer cold with fear. It was thick, electric. All the tension of the last 2 days, the chase, the gunshots, the diner, the money, it all seemed to drain away, focusing into this one. Single point. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about living. I don't know who moved first. He kissed me. It wasn't the kiss of a desperate man. It wasn't rough or demanding. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was a question. And I answered it. I answered by leaning into him, my other hand coming up to rest on his shoulder. It was a kiss of absolute, unspoken agreement. Two people on the edge of a cliff, deciding to jump together. His lips were firm, warm, and tasted faintly of the mint tea I'd made hours ago. The kiss deepened. His hand slid from my jaw, down my back, pulling me closer. His arm was a steel bar, molding me against his hard, warm body. I felt the solid strength he held in reserve. My fingers, no longer trembling, moved from his shoulder and tangled in his dark hair. He broke the kiss, but only to breathe. Without a word, he hooked one strong arm under my knees and the other around my back. He lifted me from the floor like I weighed nothing. I gasped, my arms locking around his neck. He didn't carry me to the mattress. He carried me the 2 steps to my tiny, cluttered kitchen counter and set me down on the laminate surface, right next to the hot plate. The cheap counter, which had never held anything heavier than my textbooks, let out a loud, groaning, protesting creak under my weight. The sound was so pathetic, so mundane, so absurdly normal in the middle of this. A laugh bubbled up in my throat. It was a wild, exhausted, half-hysterical sound. And he laughed, that same short, rough sound from the night before. It shattered the last of the ice. It broke the tension, replacing it with a sudden, giddy warmth. He stood between my knees, his hands resting on my thighs. He was smiling, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes, turning the gray to a warm slate. "The counter," he said. "The landlord," I replied, smiling back, my heart doing a wild, unfamiliar flip. "He can take it out of the rent I'm not paying anymore." The laughter faded, but the warmth stayed, and he didn't move away. My hands were back in his hair, his arms were wrapped around my waist, holding me steady. It wasn't a deal. It wasn't an agreement. It was a pact. It was trust, forged in chaos. It was a silent promise. We stayed like that for a long time, the red light from the train bridge washing over us in silent, rhythmic waves. He rested his forehead against mine. Our breath mingled. I could feel that steady, solid heartbeat against my own. "After tonight, us," he whispered, and his voice was a raw, unbreakable vow. "No one will ever touch you again. Not the PSCE, not the Kestrels. No one will ever threaten you, or her. I swear it on my sister's name." I leaned forward, resting my head on his shoulder. I breathed him in. He smelled like mint, and the cold night, and just Ronan. For the first time since my mother's stroke, I felt a moment of pure, unadulterated peace. It was dangerous. It was impossible, but it was real, and it was the fuel I needed. We didn't sleep. The clock was ticking. He went back to the window, the watchman, and I sat on the mattress, my back against the wall. We talked. Not about the plan. We'd been over it a dozen times. We talked about after. If we survive this," I asked, "what do you do?" "Go back to being the man who needed to hide in my diner." He was silent for a long time, watching the sparse, late-night traffic, this organization, the Thistle. It wasn't always this. It was meant to protect the dock workers, the longshoremen, the men the Lantern Court exploited and the unions forgot. It was legitimate. Before Margot's death changed me. He paused. "I want to make it that again, a real logistics and security fund, something that builds, not just breaks." "The Sunrise Harbor Fund," I murmured, the name coming from nowhere, "to protect the workers." He looked over at me, a flicker of surprise in his gray eyes. "The Sunrise Harbor Fund. I like that." "And you," he asked, You'll have the money. You can take your mother to that clinic in Montreal. You can go back to the Design Institute." I shook my head, looking around my tiny attic room. That girl is gone. She left 2 years ago. No, I want to feed people. Like Mags, but better. I smiled, the first truly hopeful smile I'd had in years. I want to open a small place, in Briarport by the water. Just coffee and pastries. A place where people can come at 2 in the morning and feel safe, feel warm. "What would you call it?" "The Morning Wire," I said. Because, well, freedom is the best kind of transfer. A pale, bruised, gray light began to creep in through the window. It wasn't dawn. It was the false dawn, the hour before the sun truly rose, but it was a reminder that our time was up. Ronan stood, pulling his trench coat from the chair. The fragile peace was over. The armor was back in place. He was the boss again. He looked at me. "We have no guarantees. Nina, this plan is desperate. It could all go wrong in the first 5 minutes." "I know," I said, sliding off the mattress to stand in front of him. I zipped my hoodie. My hands were perfectly steady. He was right. There was no promise of a Sunrise Harbor Fund or a coffee shop in Briarport. There was only 11 p.m. There was only Gray Harbor. But we had chosen. We weren't a waitress and a fugitive. We were partners. We were 2 people standing together, our backs to the same wall, and that, I realized, was the only thing that would get us through the storm. The night air at Gray Harbor was cold and smelled of salt, diesel, and dead fish. It was 10:50 p.m. The place was a city of steel mountains, lit by towering, sickly yellow floodlights that cast shadows a mile long. I was in the shadow. My disguise was simple. A worn navy blue work jacket I'd stolen from the diner's Lost and Found, a black beanie pulled down low over my ears, and a pair of heavy-duty, noise-canceling headphones slung around my neck. The final touch, the one that made me invisible, was the clipboard in my hand. People don't see a person, they see the uniform. A girl with a clipboard is just part of the scenery. My heart was that steady, solid thump I'd felt against my palm. Ronan's calm had infected me, but under it, the cold dread for my mother was a low, humming wire. Courage is being terrified and stepping forward anyway. I stepped forward. "You're live, Nina!" Piper's voice crackled in the tiny, flesh-colored earpiece hidden under my beanie. "Zev's in position. He's about to get loud at Gate 2. You hit Gate 3 in 10-9. I was 50 yards from Gate 3, a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Manned by 2 PSCE guards in a brightly lit booth, they looked bored, drinking coffee from paper cups. 3, 2, 1. From half a mile away, on the other side of the harbor, came a sound so loud it vibrated in my teeth, a thunderous metallic crunch, followed by the unmistakable, high-pitched squeal of a truck's air brakes, and then a series of smaller, popping crashes. It sounded like a multi-car pileup. The 2 guards in the booth at Gate 3 shot to their feet. One grabbed his radio, shouting into it. The other one ran out of the booth, craning his neck to see the chaos. "Gate 2 is dark," Piper whispered. "Zev hit the main junction box. He's on foot, and the whole north side is in chaos. They're diverting power, and now..." The electronic lock on Gate 3's pedestrian turnstile gave a loud, metallic buzz. The small red light above it turned green. "The system just registered an emergency bypass," Piper said, her voice giddy with power. "Go. Nina, you have 30 seconds before they reset." The guard with the radio was still shouting, his back to me. The other was already jogging toward the commotion. I walked. I didn't run. I walked right up to the turnstile, swiped my old faded vendor past my face on it from 6 years ago, my eyes hopeful and tired and pushed. It clicked open. I was in. I walked past the empty guard booth, my boots crunching on the gravel, and melted into the first row of containers. I was a ghost. "Okay," I whispered, my voice sounding too loud in my own ears. "I'm in. Where am I going?" "Section B, Row 9, and Piper's voice guided me. "It's the damaged goods lot. Dead zone, no cameras. Keep moving. You're a stevedore. Remember you're annoyed, you're on a double shift, and you want coffee. Walk the part. I walked. I passed under the gaze of a giant, moving crane, its operator a tiny speck in a glass box high above. I passed a group of actual longshoremen, their faces grimy, who didn't even give me a second glance. My clipboard was my shield. Row 9 was at the edge of the yard, near the dark water. The containers here were rusted, dented, and forgotten. And there it was. G47. It was painted a faded, ugly orange. "This is it," I said, stepping into the shadow between G47 and a stack of rusted blue containers. "It's just a box. Piper." "It's not just a box," she said. "Look at the back, near the bottom vent." I crouched low, the gravel digging into my knees. There, half hidden by a steel beam, was a cluster of thick, black armored cables running from a dedicated, portable generator into a custom-installed port on the container's side. "It's powered," I breathed. "It's live." "It's not weapons, Nina," Piper said, her voice tight with excitement. "It's a server farm, a mobile command center. The Lantern Court isn't just smuggling guns. They're smuggling data. That container is their entire shadow ledger. Every bribe to the PSCE, every lost shipment, every politician in their pocket. It's the whole kingdom. This was bigger than I thought. This wasn't just revenge. This was a reckoning." "How do I get in?" "You don't. That's a magnetic lock. You'd need a key card and a retinal scan, but you don't need to go in." She guided me. "See the vent cover 4 bolts." I pulled a small, multi-tool from my jacket pocket, Ronin's. My fingers, cold but steady, worked the bolts. They were stiff, but they turned. The heavy steel cover came off in my hands. "Okay, inside. On the left, you'll feel a bundle of cables. I need you to find the main data line. It's the thickest one, wrapped in yellow tape." I reached my arm into the dark, cold vent. My fingers brushed a web of wires. I feel it. I pulled a device from my other pocket. It was a black box, no bigger than my old smartphone, with a heavy-duty clamp on one end and a small, solid-state hard drive on the other. Piper's creation. "Clamp it on," she ordered. "Hard. You'll feel a click." I positioned the clamp around the thick, yellow cable and squeezed. Click! Instantly, a tiny green light on the hard drive began to blink, a steady, rhythmic pulse. Blink, blink, blink. "I'm in," Piper breathed. "Oh, my God, I am in. The encryption is a joke. I'm pulling the whole ledger. This is beautiful. Give me 5 minutes." 5 minutes. It felt like 5 years. I leaned against the cold steel, my heart hammering, watching the green light. Blink, blink, blink. This was my moment. This was my choice. Ronin had his mission. This was mine. I looked at the stack of blue containers next to me, the ones I was hiding behind. On the side, stenciled in white, was the logo Seagull Logistics. The Kestrels. I pulled a small mesh bag from my pocket. It was filled with a dozen small metal discs, each the size of a quarter. Wind pilots, Ronin had called them. Simple, low-tech GPS trackers with a 1-week battery life. While Piper's green light blinked, I moved. I walked the length of the Seagull Logistics stack, peeling the adhesive backing off the trackers and slapping them, one by one, onto the frames of the containers. In the wheel wells of the trailers they sat on. Up high, down low. They were now my eyes. "Nina, what are you doing?" Piper's voice was sharp. "Insurance," I whispered, pressing the last one into place. "If the Kestrels move their assets, I want to know where they go." "Good girl." Piper's voice was full of admiration. "Okay, download at 98%, 99. Beep. The light on the hard drive turned solid green. "Got it," Piper said. "I have everything. Get the drive, put the vent cover back on, and get out of there. Zev is moving to the extraction point at Gate 3. I unclamped the drive, the small black box now feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. It was the heaviest thing in the world. It was my mother's life. It was Ronin's war. I was just starting to thread the first bolt back into the vent cover when I heard it. Shouts! Not from gate 2, from gate 3, from where I'd just come. I froze. Piper, what's going on? I don't know. Piper's voice was suddenly frantic. There's a new group, just arrived at the main gate. They're not PSCE. They're, oh, my God, they're Kestrels, a whole damn strike team. I looked out from behind the containers. She was right. A dozen men in black tactical gear, identical to the ones from the diner, were fanning out into the yard. They were wearing fake badges, just like before, shouting and waving warrants. And leading them was a man who made my blood freeze. He wore the same gear, but his face was covered by a smooth, stark white mask, crafted to look like the head of a predatory bird, a kestrel. Its black, emotionless eyes seemed to scan the yard, right for me. Nina, get out of there! Piper was screaming in my ear. They're not just here for the container, they're here for you. My bid on the exchange, it worked too well. They're here to grab Hale's contact. I scrambled backward, fumbling the drive. Where do I go? I don't know, just hide Zev can't get to you. I looked around, frantic. The yard was a wide-open killing floor. And then I saw it. A massive yellow forklift, parked and silent 20 yards away. I ran. I didn't care about stealth. I dove, sliding on the gravel, and pulled myself into the dark, greasy space beneath the heavy machinery. I pressed my back against a giant, oily wheel. My knees to my chest, I could smell the hot metal and hydraulic fluid. Nina status? Piper's voice was a tinny shriek. I'm under a forklift, I whispered, my heart trying to beat its way out of my throat. Shut up! Shut up! I watched from the shadows. The Kestrels were moving with brutal efficiency. They had a purpose. They were heading right for row 9. But before they got there, sirens. Not police sirens. These were different, deeper, louder, more authoritative. A fleet of black vehicles, sleek and official-looking, screamed into the yard from the main gate, their blue and red lights cutting through the yellow haze. They weren't PSCE. They weren't Kestrels. The men who piled out wore high-end, dark gray uniforms with a gold emblem I didn't recognize. CCO. Who the hell is the CCO? I whispered. City Crime Office. Piper's voice was breathless. A joint task force. They're supposed to be, I don't know, they investigate financial crimes. What are they doing here? A CCO commander, a tall woman with a severe face, stepped out and leveled a bullhorn. This is a CCO operation, all PSC and contractor personnel. Stand down, this yard is on lockdown. We have a credible threat of a leaked internal operation. The Kestrels froze. The man in the white mask stared at the CCO commander. A silent, vicious standoff. A mole. A third party. Someone was pulling all the strings. Nina, Piper's voice was low and it was terrified. We're compromised. Everyone is compromised. I have to burn the bridge. Piper, what are you doing? They know about the data. The CCO isn't here for the container. They're here for the ledger. If they get it, they'll bury it. They're just another part of the problem. I'm leaking it now. All of it. Leaking it where? Argent Wire, she said. The biggest underground news site in Eastfall. I'm sending the entire PSCE payoff list, all the fake badges, all the lost shipments, to every reporter on their payroll. The game's over. They can't hide it if everyone has it. Piper, no, that's too late, she said. It's sent, now run. The CCO just put a bounty on that hard drive. As if her words were the trigger. The world exploded. I don't know who fired first, the man in the white mask or one of the CCO agents. A single crack of a gunshot echoed off the steel, and then it was a war. Men were shouting. Muzzle flashes lit the space between the containers. I was in a crossfire. This was it. This was where I died. No. I looked up. Above my head, on the side of the forklift, was a small, red handle. Manual fire suppression. Pull hard. It wasn't for fire. It was for chemical spills. Courage is being terrified and stepping forward anyway. I grabbed the handle with both hands. I put my feet against the wheel axle. And I pulled. A high-pitched, screaming alarm went off. from nozzles all over the crane and forklift area. A thick white foam like the one from the diner, but 100 times worse, began to gush, covering everything. "The fire alarm!" someone shouted. "Chemical fire!" Chaos. Absolute, total chaos. The foam was everywhere. Knee-deep in seconds, the shouting turned to panicked coughing. Visibility dropped to 0. This was my chance. I crawled out from under the forklift, the foam cold and slick on my hands. I held the hard drive to my chest. I couldn't see. I just ran. I ran toward where I knew Gate 3 was. I slammed into a container, bounced off, and kept running. I could hear engines, not sirens, engines roaring. Vroom! A black pickup truck, its headlights cutting through the white fog like angry eyes, burst through the chain-link fence of Gate 3. It didn't wait for the turnstile. It just came. The truck skidded to a stop on the wet pavement 10 feet in front of me. "Zev!" I screamed. The passenger door was locked. The truck bed was open. "Get in!" he yelled. I didn't hesitate. I threw the hard drive into the bed and scrambled up, tumbling over the side, landing hard on the cold metal. "Go!" The tires smoked, the truck fishtailed, its engine roaring, and shot out of the yard, back onto the dark, empty street. I looked back. We were being followed, the Kestrels, in their black SUVs, and the CCO, in their sleek sedans, had seen us. They were pouring out of the breach in the fence. The chase was on. I huddled in the truck bed, the wind ripping at my face. My earpiece crackled. It wasn't Piper. "Nina, status." "Ronan." His voice was perfectly, impossibly calm, like he was ordering coffee. "I have it," I yelled over the wind and the engines. "I have the drive, but they're all behind us, the Kestrels, and some new group, the CCO. "I see them," he said. "Zev, don't try to lose them. You can't lead them." "Lead them where?" Zev's voice yelled from the cab. "The Arc Line Bridge," Ronan said. "Head for the south interchange. I'm cutting them off. I'll meet you there." The line went dead. I looked at the small, black hard drive in my lap. It was covered in foam and grease. It held the truth, and everyone in Eastfall wanted it. I clutched it to my chest, my knuckles white, as Zev took a hard right, the tires screaming. The wind in the open truck bed was a solid wall, trying to tear me apart. I huddled against the cab, my arms wrapped around the hard drive, my face raw and stinging. Behind us, the high-pitched European-style sirens of the CCO vehicles were mixing with the guttural, American roar of the Kestrel's SUV engines. They were a pack of wolves, and we were the rabbit. "Heads down," Zev's voice yelled from the cab, barely audible over the roar of the wind. "We're at the interchange." Zev wasn't trying to lose them in the alleys. He was on the main thoroughfare, pushing his beat-up pickup truck to its absolute limit. The engine screamed in protest. We hit a ramp. The truck went momentarily airborne, and my teeth slammed together as we landed hard on the elevated highway leading to the Arc Line Bridge. The bridge was a massive, skeletal harp of steel, spanning the dark, oily Eastfall River. It was the city's main artery, and at this hour, it was dead empty. "Where is he? Zev?" I yelled, my voice torn away by the wind. "I don't see him!" "He said the south interchange," Zev yelled back. "Just hold on." The convoy was right on us. A black CCO sedan pulled alongside, its window sliding down. A man in a gray uniform leveled a handgun at us. Zev yanked the wheel. The truck swerved violently, slamming its rear quarter panel into the CCO car, forcing it back. But the Kestrel's SUV just rammed us from behind. The crunch of metal on metal sent me sprawling against the tailgate. We were being herded. "They're not trying to stop us," I screamed, the realization hitting me. "They're pushing us. They want us on the bridge." "I see 'em," Zev yelled. Up ahead, at the base of the bridge's massive support pylon, was a concrete service area, a dead-end road for maintenance vehicles. A single, dark figure stood there, Ronan. And beside him, to my shock, was Mags. Zev didn't slow down. He aimed the truck straight for the service road, shot past Ronan and Mags, and slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop in a cloud of its own tire smoke, perfectly penned in by the concrete barriers and the dark river. It was a trap, but who was trapping whom? The Kestrel and CCO vehicles screamed off the highway ramp behind us, blocking the only exit. Headlights from a dozen cars pinned us, turning the small concrete lot into a high-noon stage. "Zev now," Ronan's voice commanded. Zev, who I thought was just a driver, leaned out his window. In his hand was a canister. He pulled a pin and threw it. He threw two more, high arcs that landed perfectly between us and the approaching blockade. The canisters exploded, not with a bang, but with a thick, violent tsh, a wall of impenetrable, acrid, white smoke instantly erupted, obscuring us from them. "Smoke," I coughed, jumping from the truck bed, clutching the hard drive. "That's his plan." "Military grade," Zev said, joining us, his face grim. "They can't see us, but they can't shoot what they can't see." "It won't hold them for long," Ronan said. He and Mags weren't looking at the smoke. They were looking at the opposite end of the lot. "He's right," Mags said, his old, tired voice steady. "It's not for them." From the darkness behind us, another set of headlights cut on. A single car. It hadn't been part of the chase. It had been waiting. A long, black, immaculate sedan, the kind that cost more than my diner salary for 10 years, glided out from under the bridge pylon. It wasn't a cop car. It wasn't a Kestrel SUV. It was a government car. It parked 20 feet from us, its engine a silent, expensive purr. The back door opened. A woman stepped out. She wore a perfectly tailored dark gray pantsuit and heels that clicked with authority on the pavement. She was tall, in her 50s, with sharp features and hair pulled back into a severe, elegant bun. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a business magazine, not under a bridge at midnight. "Lucia Vane," Ronan said, his voice a low growl. The name hit me. Lucia Vane, the urban security commissioner, the woman whose face was on billboards all over Eastfall, promising to cleanse the port and restore order. She walked toward us, alone, her hands empty. The wall of smoke Zev had created acted as a perfect backdrop, isolating us with her. "Mr. Hale," she said, her voice crisp and clear, carrying easily in the cold air. "You've been a very difficult man to locate." She didn't look at him. She looked at me. "And you must be Miss Keats," she said. Her smile was a thin, bloodless line. "The $1 million waitress. You have something that belongs to the city." She held out one perfectly manicured hand. "The hard drive. Please, in exchange for your full cooperation, I am prepared to offer you and your mother full protective relocation, a new life, far from here. Think of it, Nina, Elaine, in a quiet, safe place." My blood went cold. She used my mother's name. The text message, it wasn't from the Kestrels. It was from her. I clutched the hard drive to my chest. "You're the CCO," I said. "You're the ones who stormed the port." "The city crime office is under my jurisdiction," she said dismissively. "They were there to secure a dangerous asset. You interfered. Give it to me, Nina. This is your only way out." I looked at Ronan. He was watching Lucia, his face a mask of stone. I looked at Mags. He was watching me, his eyes full of a strange, fierce pride. I turned back to Lucia. Courage is being terrified and stepping forward anyway. "Rutherford Ice, Unit 17, I said. Lucia's smile flickered. She hadn't expected me to speak. "What about it?" she asked. "The Kestrel's refrigerated truck," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "The one they used to move their strike team. The lease on that warehouse, Seagull Logistics. It was signed off, approved, and fast-tracked by you. You didn't just cleanse the port. Commissioner, you made space for your own rats." The bloodless smile vanished. Her eyes went hard. "You're a very stupid, very confused girl." "Am I?" My earpiece, which I thought was dead, crackled to life. "Patching it, Nina," Piper's voice whispered. "Go." "Then let's clear up my confusion," I said. "Who exactly am I talking to, the commissioner or the Kestrel's partner?" I tapped my earpiece. A new voice filled the air, broadcast from the speaker on Zev's truck, a harsh, electronically distorted voice. "Don't care about the drive I want, Hale, and I want the girl your CCO unit failed. Lucia, my men had the yard." It was the man in the white mask. Lucia Vane went rigid, her eyes darted to the truck, then to me, sheer, cold fury radiating from her. Piper was patching in a live, encrypted call. She was listening to her own treachery. Ronan stepped forward, into the light. "It's a triangle. Commissioner," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "The Lantern Court provides the money and the political cover. The Kestrels provide the violence, the chaos, the plausible deniability. And you sit at the top. You're the clean hand. You legitimize it all. You use your CCO to clean up their messes and attack their rivals." He held up a small, black USB stick. "And this," he said, tapping the hard drive in my arms, "is the ledger that connects all three sides. The payments from the Lantern Court to Seagull Logistics. The transfer approvals from your office." Lucia Vane laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "A ledger." She looked at me. "You think you're the first person to find a ledger you think that matters." She didn't raise her voice. She simply snapped her fingers. Click, click, click. On the warehouse roofs surrounding the lot, on the girders of the bridge above us, red dots, a dozen of them. They danced across Ronan's chest, across Mags's face, and settled, hot and bright, right over my heart. Sniper lasers. "The drive," Lucia said, her voice soft, deadly. "And the USB, now. Or this little revolution ends in a very quiet, very tragic accident under a bridge." Ronan moved so fast I barely saw it. His hand clamped on my shoulder, spinning me, pushing me back into the one sliver of total darkness, the space between Zev's truck and the concrete pylon. His body was a shield in front of mine. He was staring at Lucia, his eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was terrifying. He was unarmed. He was completely exposed. "Ronan, no," I breathed. The red dot was still on me, just visible on my shoulder. They wouldn't shoot him. I was the target. I held the drive. I took a breath. I stepped out from behind him. "Nina, get back," he snarled. "It's okay," I said. I looked Lucia Vane right in the eye. The red dot was a heavy, hot weight on my chest. "You can't shoot me," I said, my voice shaking, but clear. "Oh," Lucia smiled. "Watch me." "Because the second my heart stops," I said. Piper hits send. She calls it a dead man switch. The second your sniper pulls that trigger, this entire hard drive, every ledger, every bank number, every name, it doesn't just go to the Argent wire. It goes to the Federal Integrity and Cooperation Command, the FIIC, the real feds, the ones you can't buy. Lucia's face did not change, but the air did. The certainty was gone. "You're bluffing," she whispered. "Am I?" I said. "You've got a dozen snipers. I've got one girl with insomnia who just brought your whole kingdom down. Who are you betting on?" The standoff stretched. The red dots didn't waver. The silence was absolute. Lucia's face changed. The anger was replaced by something else negotiation. The politician was back. "All right," she said, spreading her hands. "Let's be reasonable. That money, the 1,200,000, it's a rounding error. I can double it, triple it, right now, an Orion transfer, just like his $5 million for that drive. $5 million, a new life, not just for my mother, but for me. A life I couldn't even imagine." I looked at Ronan. He was still half in front of me, his body tense, ready to move. He was watching me. His gray eyes were unreadable. He wasn't telling me what to do. He was just waiting. The choice was mine. I remembered his words in my attic. Freedom isn't running. I turned back to Lucia Vane, and for the first time I smiled. "I don't sell my freedom," I said. Before Lucia could even react, a sound split the night, a long, deafening whoop from a ship's horn on the river. And as if cued by the sound, the world lit up. The giant digital advertisement billboard on the side of the Arc Line Bridge, a screen 100 feet tall that usually showed ads for soda and casinos, flickered and then it blazed to life. It wasn't an ad, it was a list. PSSE corruption caught in the act. And under it, 5 names, 5 high-ranking Port Security Commission officials, and the amounts they'd received. Harris, J. $200 000 Macron. T. $350 000. Piper, I breathed. She hadn't just leaked it to the press. She put it on a billboard. She'd lit the stage. Through the wall of smoke, I heard shouts, panicked shouts, the CCO agents, the Kestrels, they were seeing it. The snipers, their red dots wavered. They were on their radios. Their chain of command was evaporating. The Lantern Court, wherever they were seeing it. The Kestrels, their partners exposed, were seeing it. A black Kestrel SUV's engine roared. It reversed, spun in a spray of gravel, and sped off into the night. Then another. They were running. The rats were leaving the triangle. Lucia Vane stared at the billboard, her face a mask of disbelief. Her entire power structure had just been lit on fire for the whole city to see. Her hand went to a weapon at her waist. "You," she snarled, turning on me. "It's over, Lucia," Ronan said, his voice like ice. She looked at him, at me, at the billboard. She knew she was beaten. She backed away, step by step, toward her sedan. "This isn't an end," she hissed, her voice full of venom. "You didn't win. You just chose a war you can't possibly finish." "No," Ronan said, stepping forward, out of the shadows, into the full glare of the billboard. "We chose the light." She got in her car. It slid backward into the darkness and was gone. The smoke was clearing. The lot was empty. Save for us. Zev let out a long, shaky breath. Mags was already walking toward Ronan. I just stood there, clutching the hard drive. We'd won. We'd faced the monster, and we'd won. But as I looked at Ronan, a cold, sick realization settled over me, heavier than the hard drive. Lucia's CCO, the Kestrels, they had all shown up at Gray Harbor after I was inside. They had been waiting. They knew the 11 p.m. timeline. And then they'd followed us here, to the Arcline Bridge. Ronan had told me the bridge plan in Zev's truck, but Lucia had been waiting for us. Piper was our ghost, Zev was our driver, Mags was our rock, and Ronan was the target. Someone in his inner circle, someone I hadn't met, had leaked our location. To Lucia. The war wasn't over. It had just moved inside. We didn't go back to my apartment. We didn't go anywhere I had ever been. Zev drove us. The hard drive, a cold, heavy weight on my lap. The silence in the pickup cab as thick and heavy as the smoke we'd left at the bridge. My mind was stuck on a loop. A cold, sick realization Lucia Vane had been waiting. They all had. Zev navigated the dark, industrial back roads of Saltfield, a part of Eastfall I only knew from warning signs. He killed the headlights, punched a code into a rusted metal keypad, and a section of a chain-link fence slid open. We drove into a vast, dark yard filled with shipping containers, a warehouse, number 42. The bay door rolled shut behind us, and for a moment we were in absolute, echoing blackness. Then rows of harsh, white fluorescent lights snapped on, one by one, revealing a cavernous space. Mags was already there, standing by a table with a sputtering hot plate, the smell of fresh, strong coffee instantly making the place feel marginally safer. Zev got out of the truck, his face pale, and immediately went to help Mags. Piper Lowe was there, in person. She was even smaller than I imagined, a tiny, sparrow-like figure swimming in an oversized black hoodie. She was perched on a stack of wooden crates, surrounded by a spider's web of cables, open laptops, and glowing monitors. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week, her eyes bright and wired. And there was another man. He stood by a large, grease-stained map of the Eastfall port, his arms crossed. He was older than Ronan, maybe in his mid-40s, with sandy blonde hair cut short and practical. He wore a canvas work jacket and jeans. He looked like a construction foreman, solid, steady, and completely unimpressed. Ronan got out of the cab. "Arlen," he said. It wasn't an introduction, it was a statement. This was Arlen Drax, the right-hand man, the 10-year veteran. Arlen's eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, flicked past Ronan, past Mags and Zev, and landed on me. His gaze was sharp, cold and assessing. He wasn't looking at a person. He was looking at a variable, a problem that had been introduced into his equation, and he clearly didn't like the answer. I placed the hard drive on the metal table in the center of the room. Ronan placed his USB copy beside it, the two most dangerous objects in the city, sitting next to a half-empty mug of coffee. "Report," Ronan said, his voice echoing slightly in the huge, empty space. "The board's on fire," Piper said, her fingers a blur across her keyboard. "Argent Wire's billboard lit up every news feed in the state. The mayor is appalled. The CCO is investigating the leak. Lucia Vane has officially taken a leave of absence. She's a ghost. The Lantern Court is trying to liquidate assets, but I'm playing whack-a-mole with their accounts." "Good," Ronan said. "No," Piper snapped, not looking up. "Not good." The room, which had been buzzing with the low hum of her equipment, went dead silent. "The CCO didn't just show up at Gray Harbor," Piper said, her voice thin. "They weren't responding to a tip. They were waiting. They knew the timeline, 11 p.m. They knew the asset G47. They knew the operative Nina." Arlen let out a short, dismissive scoff. "And why did they know? Because this one," he jabbed a finger at Piper, "decided to light a digital flare announcing our plan on the Shadow Exchange. She told them we were coming." "The bid was a lure," Piper shot back, spinning on her stool to face him. "It was vague. It just got them to the table. But the leak was specific. It was tactical." She spun a laptop around. On the screen was a log file. "My server, Ronan, the one I used to patch the comms. It was accessed, not from the outside, from within our encrypted network." Ronan stepped toward the screen. "Who?" "There are only 4 encrypted credentials with master access to that comms channel," Piper whispered. And for the first time, she looked genuinely scared. "Mine, yours, Zev's." She paused. "And Arlen's." I felt the blood drain from my face. Zev just held up his hands. "Boss, I can't even get my smart TV to work. It wasn't me." Arlen didn't even blink. His cold blue eyes stared Piper down. "You're pointing at me, the girl who just happened to have a $120,000 payday. The girl who happened to know how to set up this perfect dead man switch. She's the mole. She's been playing us from the second she laid eyes on you. Ronan, she gets the Waitress act in, gets her hands on the drive, and sells us all to Lucia for a bigger payout. This is obvious." The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisoned. "Piper," Ronan's voice was low, dangerous. Could his credentials have been stolen, cloned? "No," Piper said, shaking her head. "It wasn't just a password. It was his private key, tied to his biometric ID. It was him. He logged in 1 hour before the raid on Gray Harbor, and again 20 minutes before we hit the Arc Line Bridge." "Melly, this is insane," Arlen said, finally raising his voice. He took a step toward Ronan. "You're going to believe this child who you've known for 48 hours, over me 10 years. Ronan, I've been with you 10 years. "Mags," Ronan said. The name was a gunshot in the silence. Ronan wasn't looking at Arlen. He wasn't looking at Piper. He was looking at Mags. The old cook stopped wiping a coffee mug. He looked down at the counter, his face a roadmap of regret. "Arlen," he said, his voice heavy. "It's a long time. 10 years. But I remember before that. I remember the Doc 9 war. You got in deep. You took a marker from the Lantern Court." Arlen went perfectly still. "It was a bad debt," Mags continued, his voice barely a whisper. "They were going to take your boat. They were going to take your hands. And Ronan paid it. He paid it all. Cleared your slate." "And I have repaid him," Arlen roared, his calm finally breaking. 10 years of my life, my loyalty every single day. "A debt of gratitude," Mags said, shaking his head slowly, "is a heavier chain than a debt of money. The Lantern Court. They don't just clear a slate, Arlen. They just wait. They wait to collect." "Arlen," Ronan's voice was flat. "Tell me he's wrong." "He's not wrong," Arlen shouted, "but I am loyal. The one who isn't loyal is her, the variable, the girl you brought in, the girl you dumped a fortune on. You got soft. Ronan, you brought this on yourself." I was watching Arlen, but my mind was somewhere else. It was on the hard drive, on the files Piper had pulled. M, K, Margot, warehouse explosion, and a name, a contractor. "Piper," I said, my voice quiet, but it cut through Arlen's rant. "The drive, the files you pulled, was there a manifest, an old one for the Saltfield warehouse? The one that exploded?" Piper frowned, her fingers flying. "Yeah, an old payroll file. Saltfield Demolitions, YEA." "Was there a name on it?" I asked. "An engineer, not Hess, someone else." Ronan was staring at me, his eyes wide. He knew what I was asking. "Yeah," Piper said, reading. "A junior engineer, a Drax. A Drax." I looked at Arlen. His face had gone a chalky, sickly white. "You were there," I whispered. "You weren't just in debt to the Lantern Court. You worked for them. You were part of the crew that planted the demo. You were there when Margot died." "No," Arlen breathed, his hand moving slowly toward the zipper of his canvas jacket. "No, you don't." Ronan took a step. His voice wasn't a growl. It was a plea. It was the sound of a man's world breaking. "Oh, it wasn't my fault," Arlen screamed, yanking his hand from his jacket. He wasn't holding a gun. He was holding a detonator. It was his he wouldn't pay. The Lantern Court wanted their tribute. He refused. He was arrogant, so they sent a message. Margot was the message. He let her die. The confession hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Ronan staggered, as if Arlen had physically struck him. "And you," Arlen's cold blue eyes, now burning with a fanatic's light, swung to me. "He brought you in. A new weakness, a new Margot. He's doing it all over again, and I won't let him. I made a new deal. With Lucia. With the Kestrels. They'll burn the Lantern Court and the weakness. They'll cleanse this port, the way Ronan never had the guts to." "He's the mole," Zev whispered, his hand on a tire iron. "It doesn't matter," Arlen said, his thumb on the button. "This whole warehouse is wired. A little welcome home present. You're not leaving." "Wait," I yelled. "You want to prove he's weak. You want to prove you're right. Then let's do one last test." Arlen paused, his thumb hovering. "A test." "A loyalty test," I said, my heart hammering so hard I could barely hear. "You think I'm the mole. You think I'm the one who's going to betray him. Fine, let's prove it." I looked at Ronan, forcing him to meet my gaze. "My mother. You all know about my mother." "Nina, no," Ronan said, his voice a low, ragged command. "She is out. I'm moving her tonight. My men—" "Your men?" I cut him off, my voice sharp. "How do you know who to trust? How do you know Arlen's the only one you can't? You can't trust anyone but the people in this room. And one of us is him." Ronan was trapped. I could see the agony in his eyes. "What's the test, Waitress?" Arlen sneered, enjoying this. "We move my mother," I said, the plan forming, cold and desperate. "Tomorrow, in broad daylight, a panic move. We leak a fake route to a fake facility, the Halicon Gardens Center. We'll use 3 identical decoy sedans, armored glass. We make it a convoy." I laid it out. "Zev drives decoy 1, Mags drives decoy 3, and Arlen, you're his right-hand man. You'll drive decoy 2. Won't you? You'll want to be part of the protective detail." Arlen's smile was thin. He was caught. If he refused, he was guilty. If he agreed, he could feed the route to the Kestrels. "And you, Ronan," I continued, "will ride in a nondescript command van, half a block behind, with Piper. You'll watch the whole thing. You'll see who they target. You'll see who the real mole is." "And your mother," Ronan said, his voice raw. "You'd put your mother in one of those cars. You'd put her in the crossfire. I won't allow it." "She won't be in any of them," I said quietly. Ronan stared at me. "While you were all at the bridge," I said, my hand going to my pocket, touching the cold Aurelia key. "While Lucia was making her speech, I was on the phone. Your Montreal contact is very efficient. They moved her 3 hours ago. She's not at the little gray home. She's not even in the city. She's safe. The convoy, it's a ghost. It's just bait, a trap, set just for Arlen. The look in Ronan's eyes, it was relief. So profound, it was painful. And then, it was that flicker of pure, undiluted awe. I had moved my own piece. Arlen looked from me to Ronan. He knew he was caught. "Of course," he said, his voice smooth, the mask of the calm engineer sliding back into place. "I'll drive the car. I'll protect the bait for Ronan." The next day, 2 p.m., the intersection of Loth and Vine, a sun-drenched, empty industrial street. I was in the command van with Ronan and Piper. It was a filthy plumbing van, parked at the end of the block, and it was packed with monitors. "Convoy is approaching the junction, Piper said, her voice tense. "Decoy 1 is clear." Zev's voice crackled on the comms. "Decoy 3 is clear," Mags reported. "Decoy 2, Arlen's voice, tight with fake panic. "I think I have eyes on me, a glint on the roof. To the east, I think, oh God, I think it's a drone." "He's good," Piper whispered, her eyes glued to her own drone feed. "It's a Kestrel stealth drone. He shouldn't be able to see it, but it is locked onto his car. It's not even looking at the others." "Arlen, stay calm," Ronan said into his mic, his voice pure ice. "Maintain your speed. Do not break formation." "I can't! They're dropping! They're right on top of me!" Arlen screamed. And then, his comm channel erupted in a burst of static, and a new, crystal-clear frequency blared from Piper's main speaker. "Locked on target 2. He's diverting south. All units converge." "He switched comms," Piper yelled. "He's on the Kestrel channel. He's directing them." Arlen's sedan yanked the wheel, breaking from the convoy, and shot down a side alley, heading toward the abandoned electric subway tunnels. "He's running," Zev yelled. "Intercept," Ronan commanded. "He's not escaping." He slammed the van into gear. We tore after him, Zev and Mags right behind us. We saw Arlen's car slam to a halt at the gaping black mouth of the old freight tunnel. He was on foot, scrambling into the darkness. Ronan was out of the van before it even stopped moving. "Ronan, wait!" I screamed, tumbling out after him. I wouldn't let him face this alone. We plunged into the tunnel. The air was cold, damp, and smelled of copper and mold. Our footsteps echoed in the oppressive dark. Arlen, Ronan's voice was a raw-throated roar that bounced off the curved walls. A laugh echoed back, distorted and thin. "You should have paid the price. Ronan, you were always weak. You always let your heart get in the way." We saw him, a silhouette against a distant ventilation shaft. "Margot," Ronan started, taking a step. His hands clenched. "I tried to save her. I tried." "You tried!" Arlen screamed, the sound breaking. "She's dead because you wouldn't sacrifice. You wouldn't pay the Lantern Court. You thought you were better than the rules. So they made an example. And now I'm making one of you. I'm taking away your new toy. Your new Margot." Ronan froze, the confession hitting him like a physical blow. "Revenge doesn't bring the dead back." "Arlen," I shouted, my voice echoing, high and sharp. "It just kills whatever's left of the person who's still living." "What does a waitress know about anything?" Arlen laughed. He raised his hand. He was holding the detonator from the warehouse. "I wanted to take everything from you, Ronan, just like you took everything from me. Lucia, the Kestrels, they were just a tool." He pressed the button. There was no explosion, just a deep, sickening thump, a magnetic pulse. Above us, the ancient rusted ceiling girders groaned. Sparks showered down. With a sound like tearing paper, the ceiling cracked. "Ronan, move!" A massive slab of concrete and rebar tore free and crashed onto the tracks between us and Arlen, blocking the tunnel completely. "Help! Oh my God, we're trapped! Help us!" The shout, it wasn't Arlen. It came from behind the collapse. "Piper," Ronan yelled into his wristcom. "Who else is in this tunnel?" "A city maintenance crew." Piper's voice was frantic. "They were checking the old lines, 3 men. They're on the other side of that collapse." Arlen's laughter was already fading down the dark tunnel. Ronan took one step toward the rubble, his face a mask of pure, murderous rage. He could try to climb it, he could go after him. But from behind the wall of concrete, a man was screaming. Ronan looked at the impassable rubble. He looked down the dark tunnel where his betrayer was escaping. He looked at me, his eyes full of a terrible, agonizing choice. Revenge or the innocent. He turned away from the tunnel. He put his hands on the sharp, broken edge of the concrete. "Zev Mags," he roared into his comms. "Get in here, we're digging, we have men trapped." He looked at me, his knuckles already bleeding, his choice made. He had let his sister's killer go to save 3 strangers. "Piper," I whispered into my own comm. "He's gone, but he's still on that frequency. He's an arrogant bastard. He's probably still talking. Can you trace that signal? Where is he going?" A pause. The only sound was Ronan and Zev shouting, trying to move rebar. "He's not smart," Piper's voice came back, grim and cold. "He's broadcasting wide. He thinks he's won. He's at the Glass Spire Aquarium. He's meeting someone, Lucia. He's saying the night ends at the Glass Spire." The Glass Spire Aquarium was not a building. It was another world. After hours, it was a cathedral of silence, a place of deep, cold blues and impossible shadows. The only light came from the massive tanks themselves. We weren't a rescue team. We were ghosts, moving through an underwater city. My heart was that steady, solid drum. We had saved the maintenance workers in the tunnel. Ronan's choice, his sacrifice, had cost him Arlen, but it had cemented who he was. Now, we were here to end it. Piper's voice was a whisper in my ear, patched in from the command van she'd parked 2 blocks away. "I'm in their system. It's a skeleton crew tonight, just Kestrel units posing as private security. They're using the Shark Kingdom exhibit as their meeting hall. Arlen is leading them straight to Lucia Vane." We moved through the maintenance corridors, the air thick with the smell of ozone, salt, and filtered water. The low, deep hum of the pump motors vibrated in my chest. "We split," Ronan said, his voice low. He was armed now, a sleek, dark handgun holstered discreetly at the small of his back. His face was granite. He was here for Arlen. "I take the main floor. I confront Lucia." "And me?" I whispered. "The heart," he said. He looked at me, his gray eyes intense. "Arlen and Lucia are the sickness, but the Kestrels are the muscle. They've rigged the tank." "Nina, Piper found the schematics. They've wired pressure buoys to the main tank. If we move on them, they'll blow it, flood the building, cover their escape." "So I'm the leverage," I said. "You're the fail-safe," Piper's voice corrected. "Ronan draws their fire, and you and I go to the central pump room. The buoys are on a remote trigger, but the manual override, that's analog. That's our turf. If they try anything, we shut them down." I nodded. He went left, toward the public entrance. I went right, toward the staff-only door, Piper guiding me through the maze. I found the pump room. It was a cavern, hot, humid, and deafeningly loud, filled with massive pipes and valves. "I'm in." "Piper, what am I looking for?" "The override," she said. "It's a big red pressure valve, wheel lock." I saw it, a giant red wheel, easily 3 feet across. "I'm on it." "Okay," Piper whispered. "Ronan is in position. Oh, God, Nina, Lucia isn't alone. She's got a full Kestrel guard, and Arlen's there," I breathed. "No, Nina, he's got mags." My blood turned to ice. "What, how?" "He must have grabbed him after the tunnel collapse as insurance, Nina. Ronan is walking right into it." I left the pump room, ignoring Piper's protests. I ran back into the main corridor, the one that opened onto the grand exhibit. I emerged onto a balcony overlooking the Shark Kingdom. It was a vast circular room. The center was dominated by a 3-story, million-gallon tank. Sand tiger sharks, rays, and massive groupers swam in lazy, silent circles. Their shadows, cast by the deep blue lights, were colossal, dancing across the walls. Ronan stood in the center of the room, alone. On the far side, by the observation glass, stood Lucia Vane, flanked by 6 Kestrel tactical operators, and Arlen. Arlen had his arm locked around Mags's throat, a gun to the old man's temple. "Ronan," Mags choked out. "It's a trap! Son, get out!" "Drop the weapon, Ronan," Arlen called out, his voice high and triumphant, "or I'll scatter the old man's brains all over the glass. 10 years, this is the checkmate, Ronan. The game is over." Ronan looked at Mags. The agony in his eyes was a physical thing. Slowly, he reached to the small of his back, drew his weapon and let it clatter to the polished marble floor. He kicked it away. "Good," Arlen sneered. "This is beneath you, Arlen," Ronan said, his voice dangerously calm. "Beneath me," Arlen laughed, a high, broken sound. "You're the one who's beneath me, you, with your secrets, your lies." He shoved Mags forward. "Tell them, Ronan, tell your new pet the truth. Tell her about Margot." Ronan just stared at him. "He won't," Arlen's voice was giddy. "Fine, I'll tell her he never told you." Did he? "Nina, Margot didn't die in some accident. The Lantern Court planted that bomb. They wanted to send a message. And your hero, he was there when he was too late. He found her in the rubble. He held her as she died, and for 10 years, he lied about it. He told us it was a structural failure. He covered it up to protect his own pride." The confession was a grenade. Ronan flinched, the words hitting him harder than any bullet. "He lied," Arlen spat, "and he let me grieve a lie for a decade. He was weak, but I made a deal with Lucia. I made a deal to cleanse this city, something he never had the guts to do." Lucia Vane stepped forward, her smile thin. "It's over, Ronan. Your organization is broken. The Lantern Court is in flames, and my Kestrels, they're the new power, and I am the new law." She looked up, her eyes finding me on the balcony. "Ah, the waitress. Miss Keats, your mother is a lovely woman. Did you know she likes jazz? Hand over the hard drive, and I'll guarantee her safety. Refuse, and she'll be transferred to a less comfortable facility. By morning." This was it. The old Nina would have crumbled. "Piper," I whispered. "The call from the bridge, the one with the Lantern Court, do you still have it?" "I have everything," Piper whispered back. "Lucia," I shouted. My voice echoed in the vast, watery hall. "You're a great savior, but who are you saving, the city or your paycheck?" I tapped my earpiece. "Play it." Suddenly, the aquarium's PA system, the one used for feeding announcements, crackled to life, and Lucia's voice filled the air. Not her crisp, political voice, but the snarling, angry voice from the bridge. "Don't care about the Kestrels. You tell the Lantern Court the price just doubled. I'm the one holding the CCO, and I'm the one who—" The audio was damning. It proved she wasn't just working with the Kestrels. She was partners with the very people she claimed to be destroying. She was playing everyone. Arlen froze. He looked at Lucia. You're still working with them." "He's a tool, Arlen," I shouted. "And so are you. You think she's cleaning the city? She's just buying it?" I looked at Arlen, my heart pounding. This was my last card. Piper the hard drive, the file Saltfield demolitions, the payment. "On it," Piper said. A new image flickered to life. Not on a billboard, on the massive flat-screen educational monitor right next to the Shark Tank. It was a bank ledger, a transfer, from a shell corporation to a numbered account. "What is this?" Arlen whispered. "That's Lucia's shell company," I said, my voice shaking. "And that's the account of the engineer who planted the bomb that killed Margot. Lucia paid him. She paid him to frame Ronan for the explosion. She used your sister's death to buy your loyalty. Arlen, she used your grief, and she turned you into this." Arlen stared at the screen. The gun in his hand, pressed to Mags's temple, wavered. His whole world was collapsing. "No," he whispered. "Kill them!" Lucia screamed at the Kestrel leader. "Kill them all! Blow the tank!" The Kestrel leader didn't hesitate. He raised his radio. "Execute Phase 2. "Nina, move!" Piper screamed in my ear. "They're triggering the charges. I can't stop it remotely. The valve, it's the only way." I didn't think. I ran. I flew down the stairs, back to the pump room. The building was already groaning. A deep, heavy thump echoed through the concrete, and another. I burst into the pump room. Alarms were blaring, red lights were flashing. Water was already spraying from a seam in the main pipe. "It's not working," I screamed, grabbing the giant red valve wheel. I put all my weight on it. It didn't budge. "It's pressure locked. I can't turn it." "You have to," Piper shrieked. "The glass is cracking. You have 10 seconds." I looked around, frantic. On the wall was a heavy canvas safety harness, the kind workers used to clip onto the railings. I grabbed it. I looped one end around the valve wheel, hooking it tight. I clipped the other end to the steel railing that ran along the floor. "What are you doing?" Piper yelled. "I'm not strong enough to pull it." I choked, my lungs burning from the humid air. "But I can push." I put my feet against the wall and threw my entire body weight backward, using the harness and the railing as leverage. I was a human winch. The harness went taut, my muscles screamed, the wheel groaned and turned. An inch. Back in the main hall, I heard a sound like thunder. The main tank. Ronan saw Lucia raise her backup pistol. He saw her aim it, not at him, at the pump room door, at me. He moved. He didn't run at her. He ran at me. He threw himself in front of the doorway just as she fired. Ronan. The bullet, meant for my back, tore through the flesh of his upper arm. He roared, a sound of pure rage, and kept coming. I gave one last, desperate heave. The harness strap snapped. The valve wheel spun free with a high-pitched scream, and the sound of the pumps changed. The alarms stopped. Silence, except for the drip of water. I collapsed to the wet floor, my muscles jelly. The tank hadn't breached. Ronan was at my side in an instant, hauling me to my feet, his hand on his bleeding arm. "You did it!" He breathed, his face pale but his eyes blazing. "No," I gasped, leaning on him. "We did." We stumbled back into the exhibit hall. The scene was frozen. The Kestrels were staring at the tank, which was holding. Lucia Vane was staring at us, her face a mask of disbelief. And Arlen was standing over Mags, who was safe. The gun was still in his hand, but it was shaking. He wasn't aiming it at Mags. He was aiming it at Lucia. "She didn't die because of him," Arlen whispered, his voice broken. "She died because of you." Lucia snarled, raising her weapon again. "You're all dead." She never finished. Ronan, bleeding, was faster. He crossed the 10 feet, deflected her arm, and the gun clattered away. The Kestrel operators, their leader exposed, their leverage gone, broke. They ran. And then the final sound. Wee woo, wee woo. Real sirens, not CCO, not police. These were deep federal sirens. Through the main doors, men and women in dark blue windbreakers stormed in, on their backs, in bright yellow letters, FIIC. "Piper," I breathed. "I sent the final packet when the first shot was fired," she said, her voice shaking with relief. "The full drive, the real feds." Lucia Vane didn't resist. She just stood there, her power gone, as they cuffed her. Arlen dropped his gun. He sank to his knees, his face in his hands, staring at the small, silver MKI bracelet on Ronan's wrist, now stained with his own blood. Ronan just looked at him, the anger gone, replaced by a vast, terrible pity. I walked over to Arlen. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Let justice handle the rest," I said. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. He just nodded. It was over. The flashing blue and red lights of the federal agents washed over the shark tank, mixing with the deep, calm blue. Ronan walked over to me. He stood there, bleeding, exhausted but whole. "Your freedom," he said, his voice quiet. "It's still yours. That $1,200,000, it never bought your heart, Nina." I looked up at him, my eyes blurring with tears I hadn't let myself cry for 3 days. "No," I whispered, "but it bought me the time to choose." I reached up, my hand steady, and touched his face, and I kissed him. It was short and warm, and it wasn't a desperate act. It was a promise. My mother's new facility was quiet. It smelled like lavender, not disinfectant. When I visited, I brought a small radio. We listened to Billie Holiday. She couldn't speak, but for the first time in 2 years, I saw her tap her foot. She was safe. The Blue Mercury became famous, the little diner that took on the port. Mags, a local hero, still made the best eggs in Eastfall. Ronan's Thistle organization was dismantled. In its place, he built the Sunrise Harbor Fund. It was a legitimate, bonded, and heavily armed security and logistics company dedicated to protecting the dock workers from the very corruption he had once been a part of. Mags, Zev, and a very well-paid Piper Lowe were on the board. I didn't give the money back. I invested it. I found a small, sun-drenched storefront in Briarport, right by the water. I painted the sign myself, Morning Wire, and under it, in small, gold letters, "Freedom is the best transfer." It was dawn. 1 month later, the air smelled of fresh ground coffee and sea salt. I was wiping down the new espresso machine when the bell over the door chimed. He walked in, wearing a clean suit that fit him perfectly. He wasn't a fugitive. I wasn't a waitress. He just looked like Ronan. He sat at the counter. I poured him a coffee. He slid the mug toward him, and his hand, warm and calloused, covered mine on the cool marble. His gray eyes met mine, and he smiled. "Thank you so much for listening to our story. We're so grateful to have you here. We would love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below to share your thoughts and connect with us. Please, if you enjoyed this journey, be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. It truly helps us. And if you want to give us an extra boost, smash that hype button to help this story be heard by even more people. We'll see you in the next one.